playing of the world's greatest game here in Perth, international football. 100 years on in 1996, it's still the world's #1 sport, and the world has come to Perth to play. A centenary of excellence played by proud West Australians. Soccer, a great Australian sport. Good on ya, Blue. Western Australians are proud of their historical background, and WA soccer is no exception. Since its humble beginning in 1896, soccer in Western Australia has contributed enormously to the sporting prowess of our great state.
The playing of sport with a ball goes back 1,000 years BC, as history shows it that it was played in Mexico, parts of America, Caribbean islands. This is the United Service Hotel. Note the Esplanade, or them days was called the recreational ground, in the background. Now this is in St George's Terrace, just up which today is Allendale Square, is where the first meeting was held on the 13th of May 1896 to start our soccer. Now this young fella's thinking of the next 100 years of soccer, so don't let us disappoint him. The game was also discovered, the Aztecs version of the game. Also some form of football has been discovered by historians in different countries of the world. Football European foundation goes back to the Greeks playing in the 12th century. That was the first badge and carried right through to the association days. The West Australian British Football Association, 1896. Britain's history goes back to church districts playing in the year 217. The Uniform Code commenced in 1848, that's St George's Terrace, as it was in 1896. But club football, as we know it today, was created by Sheffield, England in 1854. And Sheffield today remains the oldest football club in existence. Now this is a shot in Fremantle in our early immigration days, and no doubt a terrific amount of the personnel that you see here back in the early days is where our soccer was generated from. These are some of the old teams taking around the metropolitan area. And note the swan was the early day emblem, which is to this day. Fremantle Rangers in 1908, and they used the Fremantle Oval, then the Fremantle Park. Perth City United. Perth City, over the years, 100 years, won the league 9 times. Claremont in 1922. Them days, Claremont used College Park. Caledonians, 1927. It's the Charity Cup, which you'll see out at the Claremont Museum today. There's some, my word, there's some lovely players on that side. There'll be more of their history later on in our discussions. The gentleman sitting on the left of your screen there is one of the best inside forwards that I've seen. And the gentleman sitting in the middle row here on the right is the famous Jack Conduit, Victoria Park, the 1930s. They also won the league 9 times, 6 years straight. That's Jack Conduit. 6 years straight this team won the league. And you'll see their ground later on that they had all their glory was Raphael Park. Once again, the state side, and you can see some great players there. And then once again, Jack Conduit, note the swan on his pocket. Billy Waddle. Billy Waddle was also the all-time greats, and he was a great athlete from the point of view there wasn't too many could beat him over 100 yards in Western Australia in his day. Sammy Smith, beautiful footballer, and Davy Burney. These gentlemen played for Kelly's, and they are worth going to a soccer match to watch them play. That was basically the state forward line. 4 of them were Kelly's, and plus Jack Conduit from Vic Park. That's the foundation side of the Spearwood Soccer Club back in 1929, and the gentleman in the front row in the centre was the founder of the club, and Mr. Ned Ducker. Note the crowd. Spearwood versus Maccabees in the late 1940s, First Division. State 1948 side on the Nullarbor Plain. There were some very good players also in that side. Very good bunch of chaps. The wee Bobby McShane, as they say. Bob, well, I think all you here today know Bob's history. Great worker for soccer. The Fremantle Irish. Didn't the Irish play a big part right throughout the world, particularly in Australia and America? This is a shot taken in High Street in Fremantle, outside the Commercial Hotel, in January 1902. And no doubt a lot of those personnel would have visited the Fremantle Park to watch the Fremantle Wanderers of the day play their soccer. And no doubt there was possibly quite a few players in a rather large group. Now this is one of the first goals used playing soccer. As you can see, it was basically a blanket hanging up with a hole in the middle, and you had to get the ball through the hole in the blanket. A little different to our game today with the crossbar. Worldwide soccer, as we know it, commenced in 1866. The first Olympic competition won by England in 1900, and by 1924, 22 nations played in a world competition. The first World Cup was won by Uruguay in 1930. This is the ground where soccer first started in Western Australia, today's Russell Square. This is the ground that was used prior to 1896, and no doubt it would have been used after 1896, but this is where all the conversations took place in relation to the forming of the West Australian British Football Association, Russell Square. The first World Cup was won by Uruguay in 1930. It's just a little of the game's founding history which makes us all proud to be a part of the world's game in Western Australia. The United Service Hotel was the venue for the first meeting held to form the West Australian British Soccer Association at 6:30 p.m. on the 13th of May 1896. We're still at Russell Square. And the first committee elect were H. Brown Chairman, J. Davies President, H. J. Saunders Vice President, E. Pope Secretary, A. F. and B. Burt, T. Hartwick, S. Stanton were the committee. And within 3 weeks, there was 4 clubs that made up the first league. The clubs were Perth United, Civil Service, Crusaders, Fremantle Wanderers. Main games were played in the recreational ground, which you can see here now, which is today's Perth Esplanade, and the Fremantle Oval, plus some turned as cow paddocks. Russell Square was used prior to 1896 for friendly games, and as I said previous, that is where the discussions took place to form our WA League. Still on the Esplanade. Now this is the street, up the top right hand corner of Howard Street is where the United Services Hotel was. We'd all been bulldozed down now at Salmondale Square, and as you can understand, they just had to walk from the Esplanade or recreational ground, as it was them days, to the hotel. So no doubt soccer was a very good boost to the United Services Hotel. The first official game was played on the Perth Esplanade on the 30th of May 1896 between Perth in blue strip and the Civil Service in the red strips. Perth won 2-0, and the goal scorer of the 2 goals was Bird, R. Bird. Little did our pioneers expect the WA, handy to Perth, isn't it, side in 1967, host in excess of 20,000 spectators to watch Manchester United play. A great night for soccer at the Wacker. I'm Alan Beale. I would like to tell you of my thoughts of my 68 years in WA soccer. Now this is Raphael Park, where Victoria Park won 6 of its 9 premierships. A great achievement. To tell you about WA soccer for our 100th year anniversary. The people you will see and hear tell their story of involvement in our great game over the years, and some great players, I can assure you. The enjoyment I have made to compile this videotape was tremendous, so I hope you all enjoy it. And may I say now that to those that would have contributed also to our tape, this is the Fremantle Oval, where a lot of our first games were also played. Contributed also to our tape. I am sorry that there was not enough tape time for you all to be interviewed. So once again, I'm sorry. Back in 1929, still on Fremantle Oval, I used to run down to the Fremantle Park to watch Fremantle Rangers train. We were living in Palmyra. I used to fox the balls from behind the goals, and there was nearly always a period of time a group of players sitting in a circle playing cards. The Fremantle Oval, by the way, won the architectural design of the year. Although soccer was to commence in 1896, the Oval was built in 1897. And as you can see, it's not very far down to the Fremantle Town Hall. One day I said to one of the gentlemen training, Scotty Wilson, Mr. Wilson, why are those men sitting in a circle and not training? Well, Sonny, he said, they are playing penny poker, hoping that they will win enough to buy a pie. And they were threepence each for their tea tonight. Yes, things were very tough in the Depression days, and they were tough, and he was really dinkum. So if you lost your penny that you're playing with, well, you didn't eat. You know, since this is the Fremantle Park, where Fremantle Rangers played after Fremantle Oval. This is the park where I was watching them play penny poker. Many a great game was played on that park. Tramped along with my dad and brother. We saw many games here. Since soccer's official formation in 1896, WA has had in excess of 300,000 migrants from soccer-loving countries. So where do we falter? WA's population in 1896, this is Fremantle scenes, not far from the Fremantle Park, was 137,796. Of those, 96,952 were males. The amateur clubs over the years have gone from strength to strength. As John Appleby will tell us, of their progress over the years later on in the tape. Did you know that crossbars were first used in 1875, still on Fremantle Park? Referees' whistles were first used in 1878. Nets used and penalty kicks introduced in 1891. FIFA founded in 1904 and their headquarters was Switzerland. And Wembley's first cup final was in 1923. The world record gate of 200,000 was in Rio de Janeiro in 1950. Now this was Caledonian's ground at Mosman's Park. It was on this ground here, on the goal post would have been to the right of your screen, where I considered the best goal I've ever seen scored in soccer by Jack Conduit. He hit it from 20-25 yards out and the keeper just did not see it. That was Jack Conduit. No wonder he averaged 2.3 goals per game. 261, I think it was, games he played, he averaged 2.3 goals. Roseley Park, there's a bit of history here at Roseley Park in Subi. I can recall as a teenager coming up here and watching the stateside train. It was a lovely ground, lovely feature, picket fence all the way around the ground, and a grandstand I suppose that would have seated 500 to 600 people, change rooms underneath, and it was Federation look. It was really lovely. I wish to goodness it was still there to this day because it was a real feature for our soccer in the metropolitan area. Roseley Park. I don't think it is used at all today for soccer. Where would our soccer be today if it was not for the women? We spend many hours working for the game. Shall we say thank you to each and every one for the contribution made by you all? For the soccer industry, thank you. Back in the late 40s, Spearwood Rovers of the day had their showers connected straight to the well. The pump on the well used to produce the water, as there was no steam water in Spearwood them days. So after the game, it was quite amusing to see the players get dressed with no shower. And those that did have a shower, well, the water being as cold, that was their first and last shower at the Fruit Growers Reserve. Are these kids enjoying themselves? Women's first appearance in soccer was in Margaret River in 1946. Women in the metropolitan region played a game between WASFA and Julia. They donated all the takings to charity. Perry Lakes, Floriat, Western Australia. 1996 is the centenary year of soccer in WA, and I have with me today personnel that have devoted the best years of their lives to the sport we all love. Each will tell us of the different era of our game over the years from 1896. I know they will be very interesting. Jack Bosselman will ask their views of the years. Jack's soccer days go back to the 1930s, and he contributed around 30 years of his life to the sport he loved. Now I'll first introduce each of our special guests. We have Jack, who's going to do ask the questions. We have Lou Rickey, Chief Administrator of SAWA. We have Barbara Gibson, who for many, many years was on the Chief Executive side of the office and also had a lot to do with the women's soccer. And Roger, besides being Chief Executive for many years, is now our Chief Executive of our A-League side, Perth Glory. So firstly, Jack, I'll call on you to your comments, please.
If Leon's given me 3 or 4 headings here, just a brief resume. The first one, the days of the Soccer Association, as an association as distinct from the Federation, and what years I played in. Well, I started playing, I was interested in soccer as from about 1930. We had a fellow named Ned Ducker who came from Durham, and he started up the Spearwood Soccer Club amongst a lot of the locals, and I was to be related to him, and we used to go from the time I was about 11 years of age. We used to go on a truck with a fellow named Bill Stroyer, and we used to go all around the place like that. And my years went from about 1930 to 1952. I think that was my playing years, and then after that up to about, I suppose it might have been the early 60s. Dates, of course, they're gone now. Delegates meetings procedures. Well, I don't know, procedures were just the normal, but we used to have a delegates meeting, I think, once a month, and it was compulsory to attend. We at Beale had very few executives. Matter of fact, at one stage, I think I was president, secretary, treasurer and delegate, and of course it was impossible to come to all the meetings, and of course without an explanation we got fined each time. Might have got fined $2 or something of that nature. As I remember it, we had a number of venues for these meetings, but I believe that we had a house in the upper end of Hay Street near Loftus Street. I think it was on the northern side of the road, but I think that later on they bought a venue in Subiaco. I can't remember. I think Alan knows more about it than I do. Days of club treasure. Well, it's rather laughable when we talk about the present expenses that the association has committed to and the payment of players. But I do have a copy of a profit and loss account and balance sheet of the Spirit Soccer Club. Well, this particular one is 1951, but in 1934 we had a turnover of £104, which is $208. And then in 1947 it was £216, $432. And on this statement I've got here it was 197. Well, that's nearly $400. And in 1952 it was back to £113, which is $226. When you compare that with the expenses and what you players nowadays, it's ludicrous. But I think all of these things have got to be related to the value of the dollar. And at that time, I was a civil servant and I was earning $8 a week. So if you relate these figures to that, it gives you a bit of an idea. Well, that's about all I have to say. The main executives we had in those days, as I remember them, I can always remember Des Abrams. He was a secretary for many, many years. And at that time, Newton was the treasurer. I don't remember his first name. Fred Newton, was it? He was the registrar for many, many years, and Tommy Anderson took over for him. And the presidents, well, of course, presidents come and they go. I don't think we had presidents for any more than a couple of years at a time. And I can't even remember who the president was at the time. All right, so much for that. Now I'll ask you, Lou, to say a few words as a club administrator of the governing body, and I'll leave it to you.
Well, you know, I was involved with a club called East Fremantle Tricolore. It was formed in 1953, and it was formed by a lot of migrants who, you know, wanted to play soccer in Fremantle. And it started from very humble beginnings. First game was against a club called Avala. It was a Yugoslav club, played down at South Beach, and the result was a 2-2 draw. And there was a lot of hype and excitement by all the community who, you know, were waiting anxiously for this to happen. And from there it went to bigger and better things. We moved to Stephen Street Reserve, played in the 3rd Division. In those days the 3rd Division was divided into the northern area and the southern area. Mount Hawthorn won the Northern Division, and we got knocked off by South Fremantle in the Southern Division by a point, I think it was. So we had to stay in 3rd Division 2 years. The following year we came up into 2nd Division and shifted, that was in 1955, shifted to Warhawk Park in East Fremantle, where we stayed until the East Fremantle Tricolore Soccer Club merged with Missouri some 8 or 9 years ago, however long it was. As a club administrator, I was involved for 27 years with the club, 16 of those years as president, and it's an entirely different ball game to being an administrator within the governing body of the sport in the state. Club life and club politics are something that become very much a part of your personal life, as well as the fact that it's supposed to be a hobby, but your whole family live the life at the club. Your social functions and your social obligations all revolve around the club. You help people. In those days, we used to help people to get a job. We'd help to buy a house, and help the ethnic community to integrate into the Australian way of life. So it was very much an exciting and very much an emotional period, because these people had nowhere else to go, and we who were born in this country, who came here very young, were expected to show them around and to hold their hand to a certain extent. I was only a very, very young fellow at the time, but I enjoyed it. I come from an Italian family, born in Italy, came here when I was 2, and I have always been very proud of that heritage, and it gave me an opportunity to become involved with the people from that region, and at the same time for them to become Australian. We then, as time progressed, they call it progress. In 1960, the Soccer Association had a big bust-up. The federation was formed, and I was on the initial board of the Soccer Federation, which came into being in 1960. And then, a bit further down the track, about 6 years ago, was it 6 years ago, Rod? Yeah. SAWA was formed, and SAWA was formed by the Soccer Federation of Western Australia, who, at the time, saw the necessity to make sure that the code was unified, that we all worked under the one roof, that we all had a synergy and all had a say in what goes on. And the SAWA structure is that we have 3 independent directors, plus we have the presidents of the incumbent associations and a representative from now, of course, our new A-League team. And it is a different type of emotional experience to be involved in this sort of administration. SAWA is a necessity because it has achieved a lot of what it set out to achieve. It's got us back into the international scene. It's got us back into Southeast Asia. It's got us into the National League, which wasn't easy. We've been trying for years. We've got our junior teams. We've got our young fellas in the WA Institute of Sport, and we've now got our A-League team, which we're looking forward to very, very much. In September, taking part in the Ericsson Cup. So that's where we are now. That's where I was then, and we hope that the game, and I know the game will go from strength to strength from here on in. We are very much a part of the national scene now. At Soccer Australia, we've got a fairly strong voice. I'm personally on the President's Council of the Soccer Australia, and with David Hill there as our leader. The game in this country has never been healthier, and I know that our centenary year is going to be something to remember for a lot of people, and a lot of achievements that have taken place over the years.
Just a point, Lou, getting back to your Walk Park days with Tricolour, spectators. I mean, so I've gone there and you had a job to get into the ground more or less when you've been playing Azuri or someone like that.
Alan, the biggest crowd that I can remember at Walk Park was about 8,200 people.
Yeah.
And that was a club match against Missouri in 1972. And it was a memorable match because, it's one that John Ansett was our coach at the time, and he's written a book and he actually makes reference to that particular match in that book.
Yeah.
But those days we did get the crowds. Yeah. We had, migrants coming into this country, shiploads of them in Fremantle every week. And, for some reason or another, the game probably hasn't gone as intense as it was then. But having said that, it just means that the migrants that came into the country then have now integrated into the Australian community. And if you go to a lot of the Aussie rules games, there's a lot of those people going to them, and that's great. That's what the integration's all about. But now there's a new crop coming through, and the code I don't think has ever been healthier than it is right at this moment. because of the number of youngsters that are being developed. And let's face it, Alan, in those days, if you'd have even suggested that a player from Australia would go and play in Europe or in Britain, you would have been laughed at. Now there's something like 58 players playing overseas at the moment from Australia, so the game has achieved something.
Yeah, that's very good, Lou.
Thank you, Lou. Now, Barbara, would you say something on your working days of the soccer headquarters?
75, when I went to a women's soccer meeting with Peter Demopoulos, who was involved with them at that time, and sitting in the back of the room, I was doing a shorthand course at the time. I was taking the notes of the minutes, and the secretary of the day had a disagreement with someone and threw it in, and before I knew it, because I did the notes, I was appointed secretary. I remained secretary of women's soccer until 1985. For 1986 I became their president, and then I came out of it from then on. But from about 1979 till 83, I was asked by Ted Gray, who was the then secretary of the Soccer Federation of WA, to come in on many occasions on a casual basis to the Federation office and help them whenever they required help. And in 83 I went in to relieve the lady, Mrs. Lovacek, who was going on a 5-week overseas trip. I went in there and I didn't leave that organisation until 1991, when a new secretary, Mr. John Foster, came on board, and I was relieved of my duty. Within that period of time, the Soccer Federation had been having quite a few problems with things that the First Division clubs were not liking, and in about July of 91, the 11 clubs of the First Division pulled away from the Federation and were going to go on their own. They joined with SAWA during that period of time, and about 2 months after I had left the Soccer Federation, I was asked to come back on and do their minutes and their administration for that period of time, which I did until they came together as the PSL, which had the 11 clubs. Then it became the PSF, which came back into with 30 clubs, some of which had come back from the Soccer Federation, and then it came together at the end of 83 with the amalgamation of PSF and the PSL and the Soccer Federation, which then became known as the PSF, Professional Soccer Federation. I again was asked to stay on at that point in time under the new board, which we did, and at the end of February 94, I again was told that my services were no longer needed. At that point in time, I took a position with a base order inter-soccer club as their general secretary, and that was my first time ever of being aligned with a club. For all of my years with soccer, I had a totally neutral base, never had belonged to a club or supported a club until I took on Bayswater. I must admit I enjoyed it. I still do. I'm still their secretary. It's very difficult being an Australian in an ethnic orientated club, but I enjoy it. But I must admit I do also have a lot of people there who respect me and they take notice of what I've got to say, and we get on very, very well, and I'm enjoying it.
How these days, Barbara, is the women's side of soccer? No doubt you still keep in touch with what's happening?
I do to a degree, not a great deal, because it went through a period of time where I didn't really have a great deal of time for it. Either people running it, or the things that were happening within the structure of it. And although I was asked by various people in that organisation at the club level to come back, I decided that this was not an organisation I wanted to be a part of. Prior to that, I had been on the Australian Women's Board, firstly as their secretary and then the following year as their director of policy and coordination. But after that I just decided that when I gave it up in 86 and what transpired in the years after that, it just didn't sit well with me and I preferred not to be involved.
How often do we get the carnival here, the Australian Carnival of the Women's?
It comes around, it's on a rotation basis, so it depends entirely on how many states are in it. We used to get it once every 10 years. So if there's 12 now, you get it once every 12 years. But because they've also got an under-19s and they've also got a junior, I think then you get a rotation, so you do get a championship here on a more frequent.
I think each year we're getting more women's clubs. Lou might be able to answer that one, he might know.
Well,
Or
last
Roger.
I heard, sorry for interrupting, the last I heard was that if they had 2 divisions of 8, they would have 16, 17 clubs. But they've split them across 3 divisions, which gives you 4 in one, or 5 in one, and 6 in another, and something like that.
Yeah.
So, with 3 divisions it sounds good, but when you've got them sort of at small amounts of teams in that division, it doesn't really, from my point of view, I mean, it's entirely up to the people playing, they like it, that's fine.
It would still be a good thing for the clubs, wouldn't it, having women's soccer?
Yeah, I think it would. I think Bayswater itself...
I think they've done a pretty good job over the years.
Yes, I think if the clubs took it on, and took it on seriously, not took it on as oh yes, just give the girls give them a team, give them a coach and then play, but ignore it. They've got to take them on as a serious sport, because that's what the women want to become known as, people who are into serious sport. But I have to be honest and say this, that I am not a women's liver, I'm not equality of the sexes. I'm quite happy being a woman and a man being a man. I don't want to do what he wants to do, and I don't care if he doesn't want to do what I do. So get involved in that respect. I'm happy with them doing what they want. That's all I have to say.
Yes, Farrell, that was very interesting. And now perhaps we could hear from Roger Lafort and tell us all about Perth Glory.
Perth Glory, Western Australia, without doubt, is about to enter the most exciting part of soccer, I think, over its history. We've been waiting for a team to go into the national competition for 19 years, so I'm told, and people believed that it was never going to happen. Well, now it has happened, and Perth Glory will be entering the national competition now known as the Ericsson Cup in September this year. It will provide enormous opportunities for role models, for youngsters to become part of a major competition, to take up employment in a sporting environment. We're the last probably of the major codes to actually take part in a national competition. We've certainly seen over the last number of years that there is a hardcore of people in Western Australia who want to see high-profile soccer. We've seen it at the internationals. We've been able to attract 14,000 people to every international that's taken place in Western Australia or in Perth. And we are confident that we can now satisfy those people with a higher level of soccer in Western Australia. We try to go about it in a very professional way. The people who own the company, Nick Tarner and Paul Afkos, are very well-respected businessmen. They intend to put everything into the company that they possibly can to ensure that Perth Glory works. We do need the support of everybody in Western Australia, but we feel very confident indeed that we will achieve everything in terms of excitement, everything in terms of profile for the game, and really lift the game to heights that soccer's never seen before over here in Perth.
At this stage you're still ground-wise got to sort out your ground where you're playing, your headquarters and so forth.
Yeah, Allen Ground.
But isn't it interesting to do that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's obviously very difficult to try and find a ground. Perth Glory has always the intention of being appealing to everybody in Western Australia. It will not be ethnic based in any way, shape or form. Whilst we want obviously those people to come to our games, we want to appeal to absolutely everybody, and therefore it's important that we try to find a location that we would consider neutral. Not only that, what's going to play a major part in the success of Perth Glory is providing the comfort and the entertainment for the potential spectators. At the moment, Perth simply just does not have a ground that's capable of seating the required numbers that are laid down by Soccer Australia. They're now looking for fully seated stadiums for 12,000 people. We just don't have that. We don't even come close to that. We may find that even in the first year we have to have a temporary accommodation and then continue our search to find somewhere that's more suitable, maybe in further down the track in a few years' time.
Isn't it going to be interesting to look at this tape in 5 years' time and say, well, now this is what we were thinking on the 14th of March 1996, and turn of the century? Well, I'm hoping, and I think you will, have some great success.
I think when we look back on this, yes, you may very well be right. We're certainly looking that we could be achieving crowds between 5,000 and 10,000 people comfortably if we provide the right atmosphere at the games and we can provide the right level of competition. People in West Australia are very parochial. There'll be a lot of West versus East component when it comes to the success or otherwise of Perth Glory. We will certainly be doing our best to ensure that all of those people, not just soccer people, we certainly expect people to come along to our games that are people who like to see high-profile sport, not just soccer. As Lou said earlier on, there are plenty of people who came over here who are soccer fans, who go to Aussie Rules football. We would like to think that we are going to be appealing to people who may go to just high-profile sporting competition.
Yeah. What is your version of the fact that the AFL clubs are now looking at the summer sport with the A-League of soccer?
Yeah, I think that's very good news for soccer, with the Collingwood Warriors that are due to come in under or with the assistance of Heidelberg that used to be in the old National League. I think it's tremendous. Obviously, a lot of football clubs, Aussie Rules football clubs, see the potential of soccer. They can see that what really will happen if it really gets its act together, and I believe that under David Hill we will achieve great heights. They obviously are looking to advertise their costs with their personnel. They're looking to share their costs with their grounds. It makes sense for a summer sport to align with maybe a winter sport and utilise the facilities and the management and all their resources they have within the various clubs.
Very good. Lou, fill me in on with what part the country's played in our soccer, like such as Bunbury, Kalgoorlie. Up north they used to have some teams, didn't they? Just for the record's sake, the clubs that have over the years have supported soccer, some come to the metropolitan area but some do not.
Alan, country soccer it's there, and it's a lot healthier than probably a lot of us realise, because we're not there. They are. But I know, for instance, this weekend there's Bunbury are hosting a big event down there, and Perth Glory are going down there to play an exhibition match. And these sorts of things happen in the country. I think one area that's probably lacking is the coaching availability, if you like, for our leading coaches or our development officers to go to the country and to conduct clinics with the coaching staff in those areas. But it's very, very strong in the southwest. It comes and goes. In Albany, for instance, soccer was very strong. It died off. Now it's back again. And we've had some good players come from the country. And I think again the Perth Glory are going to give the game another dimension, where a lot of even country players and country youngsters are going to aspire to something they didn't have the opportunity to aspire to previously.
Yeah. Well, after all said and done, we officially commenced in 1896. Kalgoorlie officially commenced in 1894. So once again, I do think they're still playing quite a bit of soccer, and they're not. You might be able to enlighten me.
Yeah,
in Kalgoorlie.
They're still playing up there. In fact, not so very long ago, I went up there with one of the clubs, and there's the Boulder City Soccer Club. I've got a photo up there, and it was the 1930 team from Boulder, and sitting in the front row was Bob McShane, who we all know well and love very dearly within the sport. And the country associations are quite strong, and I think that, as I said before, if they can get a little bit more in the coaching area, but I do believe that having a team in the national competition, it'll do exactly what our other sports have done into the regional areas. It'll grow, and I'm sure that the country will contribute and benefit from that involvement.
Yeah, well, Bob came out originally in 1923 with 23-24 as a group settler on the group settlement system, and only as a boy. And I think in that era, pre-war era, there was a lot of players came up from the group settlement concept from the southwest. Right. So they contributed not only to sport, but to quite a few other things for WA, put it that way. Yeah. Any other queries we got? Any questions, Jack, Barbara?
Alan, I'd like to ask you one. What about telling us a little bit about your background, and what were your highlights in a lifetime of involvement in the sport?
Well, you put me on the spot, Lou. Right, my history is we come out of the group settlement scheme in 1923. Dad was at the time when he left England, he was captain of Plaistow, which is a region of West Ham. And once again we went down the southwest as under the group settlement scheme. But after a couple of years down there, realising that it was the biggest con trick that ever happened, really, but that's another story. But Dad, lucky enough having his trade, started building group houses. And after 2 years he came to Fremantle on the extensions of the wharf, etc, etc, and we've basically been in Fremantle ever since. I classify Spearwood as just round the corner from Fremantle, and with Spearwood I've been involved now, this is my 62nd season, that's with the one club. The family, my brothers and nephews, they've played in the vicinity of 1,900 games for one club. Well, I think that'll be an Australian record. I've dug up records and can't find any that can excel that. But getting back to my highlights, well, friendships I've made, including Jack here, we've been friends for over 60 years, and there's a few more in the same category. I suppose the highlights were our winning the Charity Cup, which is equivalent to winning the Desogna Cup now. That was one of my highlights, but my greatest highlights of the lot, Lou, was meeting people from soccer. Like yourselves and Roger, Barbara, Jack. To me, they're big highlights. I mean, you say life's what you make it, and meeting personnel that I've met, such as Jack, and a lot of other players that are my vintage, we see one another today, and we're that happy to see one another. To me, they're my highlights of my soccer, Lou.
Alan, you represent the state, and you also played league football for South Fremantle. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, I came out of the army, Lou. I played football and soccer in the Australian Army. And I came out of the army in time to play for South Fremantle the best part of their season, which included the grand final against East Fremantle at Subiaco Oval. Soccer, which I think is worth recording also, from 42, 43 and 44, 45 was annulled in the senior ranks, was entirely juniors. Football it was the same, except they started their senior competition back up in 1945. Soccer started their overage competition back in 1946. So naturally I went back to Spearwood. South, as much as South wanted me to go and still play with them, because there was no contract them days, I went back to soccer, and as Jack would tell you, I suppose for the next 30 years, I suppose I was around on the coaching side of Spearwood, later Cockburn. But that was more or less, to the extent that my football friends, a fortnight ago, all the old players were invited, and I went to a barbecue lunch at South Club Rooms, and I had as good a time as I would have if I went to a soccer match. Now, they're the friendships, that's what I made in sport, put it that way. To me,
it would be reasonable to say that this is one instance where soccer has been the winner over football.
Well, I hope so, Lou. I hope so, mate. You know.
Good on you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, anyhow, I think we've just about covered other points. I've still got interviews with referees and coaches and things like that to be done, and no doubt the different points and different aspects of the game will come to it, and let's hope by the time we finish it all we can sit down and for 2.5 to 3 hours enjoy the tape. That's the ultimate aim of it all. But thanks very much, Rog, for your participation. Thanks very much, Lou,
My pleasure.
for your participation. Jack, thank you very much, mate.
Lovely to be here.
We'll go out to dinner tomorrow night. And see, that's the things that's what sport's all about. And Barbara, more than thank you for your years of service to soccer and the work you've done with the women. And all I can say is good luck with Bayswater.
It's been my pleasure.
But thank you all anyhow for coming, and we'll catch up with you later on. Thank you very much.
Well done.
I have with me today Mr. Ted Gray. Ted was Chief Administrator of the Soccer Federation for many, many years. But don't let me tell you about it. We'll ask Ted all about it. Now, we have with him a very good friend and a very good friend of soccer in Peter Demopoulos. Peter's going to ask Ted a few questions. Okay, Pete.
Ted, your history in WA soccer before becoming our Chief Administrator. Yeah, well, I started off, I was a referee when I came here in 1968. At the same time I formed the Gosnell Soccer Club. I also became the secretary of the Amateur League at that time, and that's where I spent most of my time in those early days. And I saw the Amateur League become a very strong force indeed. We had 3 divisions of 12 with reserves as well by the time we finished, with our own referees body. And when John Venn left the amateurs to become president of the Soccer Federation, I then became president of the amateurs, and later on, as you know, John Venn asked me to come on to the federation as a secretary, which after a great deal of thought I decided to do.
Ted, can you tell us your years of administration and the highlights?
Well, I became the secretary in 1974, and the first thing that happened to me when I went to the very first board meeting was one of the members said to me, I don't think you can do the job, Mr. Gray, and he spent the rest of his time on the board trying to prove I couldn't in many small ways. But I was there until 1989, 15 years in all, and I must say it was a very wonderful experience in spite of some of the traumas that I had to endure. And of course probably the main things were meeting famous people like Matt Busby, Bobby Charlton, Trevor Brookin, Bobby's brother Jack, and many, many others. And I was host to 23 international sides by the time I left, including a couple of national sides like Russia and Northern Ireland and people like that. It was a wonderful experience, and as I say, it's in spite of the traumas.
You probably had more experience in that field of the game, Ted, than any other official we've had in the game.
Yeah, well, you know, 15 years, I sometimes think back now and realise that since I left only a matter of 6 years ago, they've had something like 7 secretaries, I think, you know, which is a shame really, because one of the things I feel that I obtained while I was there was stability. We had we didn't owe money, we paid our bills, and when I left there was considerable assets in the coffers of the Federation.
Well, Ted, there's no doubt about your experiences in the game. It's you must have a lot to tell us about your years as an executor. But anyhow, Peter will carry on with some more questions.
Yeah, well, besides all the exciting and wonderful experience, like Mick Lee and I went over to help and assist in the running of the 1981 World Youth Championship. That in itself was a experience to see the way they went on and to realise that we weren't far behind them in organisation and getting things done. And the traumas I had, like Mick Lee and I were threatened with a bomb attack, which I at first considered as a joke, but the police didn't, and our houses was under surveillance for some time. Generally speaking, it was a very good job. And then one time now, I forget the year it was, I think it was probably about 81 as well, when the board decided to sack me. It's a very hard job really, because you get 2 or 3 people come onto the board new every year and seem to think they're going to sweep the thing clean and with new brooms, and generally speaking they consider the secretary, the paid member, one of the blokes they can sweep under the carpet.
Ted, can you please explain to us the soccer headquarters and its location in your years of administration?
Yeah, well, the soccer, when I first came into soccer, they had a house in Subiaco where Mrs. Bancroft used to run the soccer mainly. And then, of course, we moved to the Velodrome, and the Velodrome offices were under the grandstand, and the steps of the grandstand came down, and I think one of the reasons they employed me was because I could work in that environment without having to bend down. But it was quite a job working there, and we had rats and cockroaches for company, but it was wonderful because we had a lot of floor space for a very small amount of money. It was $2,500 we paid a year for that place, and we had a lot of equipment there too, which we supplied ourselves, and it was probably wasn't too good a situation perhaps when people visit us, and we had to show them there and the poor headquarters we had. But I understand, well, I see now at Prairie Lake Stand we've got wonderful headquarters.
And how long were you there, Ted?
In their 15 years.
We don't might know, but it's the velodrome.
15 years.
It's the velodrome,
Yeah,
weren't that time went quick.
When I left, we were still at the velodrome.
That's
And
very
I think
good.
they were at the velodrome for probably 3 or 4 years after I left, you know.
Ted, what is your opinion of Perry Lake as their present headquarters?
Well, the headquarters I've seen there is marvellous, you know, it's wonderful. I always felt that to have your headquarters where you played a lot of matches were a good thing too, like the velodrome was good for that thing, because if you had to organise games and things like that, it was good to be on top of it. But the headquarters there now, I think, are tremendous, you know, they've got some wonderful rooms and equipment, and it's very nice, and certainly if anybody comes to visit the Federation, they no doubt will be very impressed indeed, as I'm sure they weren't too impressed when they used to come down to the velodrome, not until they met me, of course.
That's why you're there 15 years, Ted.
Yeah, it was 15 years.
Yeah.
It was a funny job at times, but you know, it's something that I wouldn't have missed.
Were you a foundation member of Gosnell Soccer Club?
I have to admit that I was the founder. It came out of, I used to play squash with a couple of fellas down the road here, and they were saying, isn't it a bit unfortunate we haven't got a soccer team in Gosnell? And I said, do you think there's enough interest? And from that time, I went and put an advert in the paper without any organisation at all, just myself alone, put an advert in the paper in February of 1969. We had a meeting at the Gosnells Hotel, and I became the secretary and the coach of the club at that time. And we had a couple of good years. We won the Amateur Cup and our division in that year, and also in 1970 we went into the 3rd division and did very well there, and still carried on doing well in the amateurs as well, so it was good.
Ted, were you always a poet?
I don't know, the first time I can recall doing any sort of, you know, I never call myself a poet. I might be an odd oder or something like that, but never a poet. But I remember doing rhymes when I was in the Navy, and the first one I can remember is when we had fish for a meal on this troop ship that was taking me out to the Suez Canal, and it was off, it was terrible, and I wrote a rhyme on the blackboard where we used to put the menus during the day, and I think from there I've always indulged a bit. But certainly more since I've been in soccer, I've been doing it. Because I do weddings and bar mitzvahs and things like that.
Thank you, Ted. That was very good.
Yeah, more than thank you, Ted. On behalf of all soccer concerned for the 15 years you put in on the executive side of it, I can assure you I had a little bit to do with it for a few years there, and as far as I was concerned, you were top of the wazza. Now, Ted, before we go, what about a poem? You must finish off with a poem, Ted.
Well, I have got a couple. There's one here I've called The People's Game. Soccer is the people's game, so I've heard them say. But it's not only for those who go out there to play, not noted for their dribbles, their talent or their swerve. People content to be helpful, to work, to care and serve. People like Des Abrams, the man of honour and skill, followed by these others, Bond, Bumer and Beale. And there's the two Freds, Fred Burflett and Fred Cumber. There's John Desegli as well, helps to swell the number. If you ask why they do it, few could tell you why. Because we love the game, would have said old Wally Fryer. Peter Greystock was there, also there, with Silver and with Ben. Their love of the soccer game made them special among all men. You'll remember Barry Greenwood and Ted Higgins too, for sure. Ted, you know who else from Albany, on our far, far southern shore. We won't forget Joe Lazzarenza, a man who had his plan. Judge Sterner and Charlie Sweeney, as well as Mick Mattlejan. They all worked for the game, like City Councillor Mick Lee, and some who took the blows, like people like Julius C. Ree. All have tried to improve soccer, worked hard but sometimes in vain. Stalwarts such as Lou Rickey and our own wee Bobby McShane. Most were made life members. To them it was a wonderful day. Oh, I'm also one as well. My name? Well, it's Ted Gray.
That's a typical Ted Gray poem. But more than thank you, Ted. It's so lovely to come up and see you. And this will be a marvellous segment for our 100th year history.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you.
And thank you, Pete, for obliging with the interview.
No problems.
just answer your questions.
And today, the 16th of April 1996, I have the pleasure of interviewing one of WA's successful soccer players who have made their way in the business world of Australia, Charles Farmer. Charlie in his day was one of WA's top players, and no doubt the reason for his business success has his success on the field of play, fairness to all. I'm just going to ask Chaz a few questions and he can fill us in on his life in Western Australia. Charlie, your soccer life before coming to Western Australia.
Well, Alan, I left the old country, mainly Glasgow, in 1956 on my 20th birthday. The reason for leaving the old country was lack of work, etc. And the closest point, other than going to Canada, was coming to Australia, and West Australia was the closest point. A great disappointment to my father, of course, because I was on the verge of becoming a premier player in Scotland. I was actually signed by Leeds United, the youngest signing ever by Leeds United, by an English manager, in fact, a fellow by the name of Major Buckley, who was quite famous at the time in the 50s. John Charles was a Welsh international, their superstar, who was a centre forward, a 6'4" giant of a man who was a great player. I played a trial for Leeds United at the age of 16 and scored a winning goal against Bradford City down in England, and that sort of gave me a bit of fame up in Glasgow, and they signed me on, and for a great sum of £15, and which took away my amateur status, of course. And I received £3.10 a week through the mail from that day on until I came to Australia.
And what was your inspiration to come? Any specific reason to come to Western Australia?
Well, there was 2 years national service required of young fellas in those days, and there was no wars to be fought. I felt as though I couldn't be an Audie Murphy or a Sergeant York, and I felt that 2 years at that time of my life was going to be a bit of a waste doing national service. So I just finished my apprenticeship as a master upholsterer, and decided to try my luck in Australia.
Well, how did it all begin, Chaz, in Western Australia, you becoming one of the best in your profession in the country?
Well, soccer was a great help to me, Alan. I came here, of course, not knowing anybody, and I remember it well. I arrived on a Friday in July, a rainy Friday morning, and I thought, my God, is this sunny Australia? It was a pretty miserable day, and came up on the train to Perth. I had digs accommodation organised for myself. I had £10 in my pocket, which I thought was wonderful, and I exchanged it for £12.10 Australian at the time. That's when a dollar was worth something here. And on the Friday, I went out. There was 2 jobs advertised, and I secured both of them, and I thought I'll make my mind up over the weekend as to which one I take, which I did, and started for a company out in Wales called Craig's New Era Upholstery. That was on the Friday. On the Saturday, in this digs I was staying in down the bottom of Belmont Avenue, I said to the fellow that was putting me up there, I said, is there any soccer player around here? And he said, oh, yeah, the play down the road there in Peat Park. So I borrowed his bike, tied my boots on the back with my shorts on, and down I went. And they were kicking in a goal, and it was called Belmont, a 3rd division team. They looked pretty aged group and all shapes and sizes. In fact, the goalkeeper was a fellow by the name of, he was a teacher at the tech school, Cyril, I just can't remember his second name, and he almost filled the whole goal up, this chap. Anyway, I said, do you have any chance of getting a game? And he said, oh, can you play some? I said, well, yeah, I play a little bit. I said, but I said, you might have to, you know, officially I said I'm still signed with Leeds United, and on that he grabbed the captain, who was a fellow by the name of captain manager of the team, a fellow by the name of Alan Wells, who was an accountant, and as soon as he had this he ripped his shirt off and he said, your name's Alan Wells. And I played my first game that day on a Saturday after having arrived on the Friday. I was a little bit out of nick because I had 6 weeks on this boat. The Suez was closed at the time, and we came around the Cape, so it was a very long boat trip, and I put on about a stone in weight, and I was no lightweight when I left Scotland, even though I was very fit. So I was about 12 and a half stone then when I arrived. However, I scored 7 goals, and we won 9-1. And of course this team thought I thought I was a Stanley Matthews. Being 3rd division, which was very low grade in those days. There was only about 7 games of the season left. All the other teams came knocking on my door at that time, Tricolori on a Sunday, and Azuri and North Perth, the whole lot. And of course I kept saying, well, you know, how much do I get for playing? And they said, oh, there's no money. In fact, you have to pay your dry cleaning down. So this was all a bit of a new experience for me, but I stayed with the Belmont team for the rest of the season, and the contacts I made there were wonderful. I started recovering lounge suites on the side and all that, because I was determined to work hard and make extra money and eventually get into business myself. So that was that period, and the following season I decided I joined North Perth.
And how long was North Perth, Charles?
About 7 seasons. They were a wonderful team. There was a Dutch goalkeeper who was very, very good. I think his name was Frank Verheeren. And the rest of the team was made up mainly of Scots, Irish and English. There was a couple of Australians, but this team was so strong, 9 of the team were actually in the state squad. However,
they had a good side.
Yeah, but they were the amazing thing, in the 6 seasons I was there, they never won a premiership or a trophy. We were a team of individuals. But they were great fellows, great company, and I enjoyed my time there.
Well, one club that was, as you say, the success perhaps was minimum for the squad they had, but the moment big money, I suppose, for soccer anyhow came into the game, North Perth folded.
Yes,
it was so sad.
Yeah, they disappeared. Unfortunately, I've labelled the Scots in this area, they're not very good givers when it comes to sponsorship and sport. Whereas the Italians and Greek and the other ethnic communities seem to support their sport.
And still do.
Yes.
And Charles still do. Yes, and was your main playing days with North Perth? How many seasons? You say 7, did you say?
Yeah, it's about 7 seasons.
Yeah.
And then I went from there to Southbound.
Oh, yes.
Because it got to the stage where I couldn't train 3 times a week because I was heavily involved in business, but I still enjoyed the game very much, and they allowed me to train twice a week sort of thing, and they would still play me because I was still very fit. But it was a different experience coming to Australia, because in the old country, if you get caught anywhere near a pub on a Friday night, particularly before a game, you just didn't play on the Saturday. So it was not the same dedication. It was more of a picnic atmosphere, I found.
Well, that's what I'm saying. To you, it would have been a big shock, the difference in systems, standard.
Yes.
And I suppose you'd say the attitude of the game.
Yes, yes, yeah. It was sort of, it was similar to the trade that I'm involved in. When I arrived here, it was, I don't mean this in a detrimental manner, it was like sort of walking back into the 18th century. Everything was so retarded as far as furniture designs and methods were concerned. And that was the same in soccer and training methods and so on. It was kick the ball and run here. Where, the game had already started to change, and we're talking 40 years ago. It already started to change when I left Scotland. It was a much quicker moving game and a passing game, whereas here there wasn't a lot of skills.
Still back to the old style.
Yes, you know, and it was the goalkeeper, two full-backs, three half-backs, and five on the forward line, and kick the ball, get out the other end as quickly as possible, kick and rush. There wasn't a lot of ground play, and that was part of my skills, because I was very, if I may say so, I had great ball control from playing 7 days a week as a boy.
Yes, there's no doubt about that as far as that goes, Charles. Yourself in business, you started off, as you say, you thanked soccer to a degree for a lot of your early days. When I can recall when you first started off, you were working at home. Then you went into your factory at Myrie, and then you've just gone ahead in large amounts and big quantities since then.
Yes, well, in fact, I started off, but before I was married, I made sure when I was in digs or accommodation that I always had a little veranda, which is a common thing here in Australia, of course, which enabled me to do home jobs. And when I eventually got married, I used one of I lived in Alfred Cove and used one of the bedrooms as my little workroom. Then I built a garage on the side and moved into that. And I employed a couple of people there until the neighbours complained, which turned out to be a good thing in the end, and moved down to a shop in Alfred Cove and did a lot of recover work for local people and advertising the local papers and so on. And then I just expanded, moved up to factories in Myrie, and eventually built here in Willard.
I've pretty well followed your career in business, Charles, but I must say this, you've got no one to thank but yourself, because you worked damn hard right from day one coming into the country, and to that I congratulate you for.
Yes, but the opportunities were here, and I'm thankful for that, and in fact I still have a British passport. Now, for the last couple of years, approaching my 60th birthday, I have a bit of a conscience about that. I think I should go and do something about it, and at least have a dual passport, you know, because Australia has been very good to me. Well, I have a wonderful family here, of course, now, who are in the business, and I'm almost retired. I'm semi-retired, but still have a great interest in the furnishing industry.
Well, what's the day in the life of Charlie Farmer in 1996 compared with, say, 30 years ago?
Well, I've definitely slowed down quite a bit. I'm not passing the ball as quickly.
You're not getting offside, Charlie, that's the main thing.
No, I'm a great... I picked up... I was introduced to golf about 15 years ago, which is one of my regrets that I wasn't introduced earlier. Not that I'm very proficient at the game, but I love the sport because it's a test really against yourself, which is the same thing in business, you know. If you have a dedication to something then and a will to succeed, you will succeed. Whether it's long hours, which is always helpful, whether it's practice or whether you're working at your business, and now I believe these are the best years of my life now. I work mornings only, and I play golf 2 or 3 times a week, and socialise with friends. I still have the odd fishing trip, which I enjoy, and a holiday, and follow golf actually all around Australia. My contacts with soccer, unfortunately, has waned. I was never a good spectator. I did try after I retired from soccer, around about the age of 36, when I really virtually stopped playing, but I haven't got the patience to watch other people play. I'm a participant rather than a spectator, so that's why I love golf so much. great outlet for me.
Well, Chaz, thank you more than thank you for allowing me to come and interview you for our 100th anniversary tape. And all I can say to you is good luck in your retirement, semi-retirement, happy golfing, and let's hope one day we'll see you back at the soccer. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Al. Much obliged.
I consider it an honour to be filming a gentleman who has worked so hard in his country of choice. Mr. Tom de Sogner, arriving in Western Australia in 1933 at the age of 13, travelling to our northeast goldfields town of Walloona. Certainly a big difference to the town of Lanciano on the east coast of Italy, and certainly would have been a tough initiation to WA, let alone playing soccer in the dust of Walloona. Enough from me, because Peter will ask Tom of his life in Italy and WA. Thank you, Peter.
You're right. You're right. Tom, can you tell us, please, your life before coming to Western Australia?
Yeah. Oh, my life before we came to Western Australia.
Look at the camera, Tom.
The life wasn't much of a life, you know. I was a country boy. I worked in the land, and I didn't go to school.
Was Lanciano, am I saying that right? Was that on the coast?
Yeah, 12 kilometres away from the coast.
Well, the big difference to the country there, the country around Walloona,
Oh, yeah.
going from one to the other, being like chalk and cheese, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I can understand. Perhaps did your dad come out? No doubt. Family.
Yes, I came here to Western Australia because my father was here then, and he was working on the Walloona gold mine.
Tom, what gave you the inspiration to come to Western Australia? I think you already answered that.
But there was no inspiration, you know. There was, I was coming here just to, I knew that...
New venture?
Yeah. No, I knew that my father was here, and so I joined him. That's what it was.
Please, Tom, can you tell us how did it all begin? You becoming one of the best in your profession in Australia. I take it by that Owen means the small goods business.
Oh, I think it's plus small goods plus these days, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, the small goods manufacturer, of course, that was started in Walloona when I was 15, 16, and I went to work at the abattoir for about 12 months. And then asked the boss, Mr. Clark, how about to give me a job in the town? And he said, oh, well, you're doing a good job here, and why you want to go to town? And I said, well, don't like it here, I'd rather be in town. Anyhow, he gave me a job in the small goods manufacture. And since then, bit the time, and after 18 months, I took over the small goods.
16.
16, 17.
You're on your top, yeah, it's good.
17 and a half, I was getting the full man's wages. At that time was £4.10 a week, and the boss got sick, Mr. Hunter got sick, and then I took his place.
Your memory's pretty good, Tom. You can still remember the names from day one.
Yeah.
Tom, as the sponsor for 35 years of a major soccer trophy, as well as the longest running trophy in Australia, how did you become involved?
That was Julius Ree was the secretary of the Soccer Federation, it's called then. In 1960, that's when Western Australia Soccer Federation was formed. Julius Ree came to see me one day, and he said, he was very humble, and he said, would you be a sponsor a trophy for the Soccer Federation? And I said, well, it depends how it is, you know. And he said then, he said he'll make a sort of a small good cup, you know, something like that. And I said, well, no. Oh, well. And I said, well, I'll think about that. And then after he went, I talked with the brother John, and I told him, I said, no small good cup is going to be the Sonia cup. He said, and he agreed entirely with me. John said, you're right. So we decided then to give him £100, £50 for the winner, and £25 each of the two run-up teams. And that's how they started.
That's how it started, yes.
Tom, the final question that Alan has here. A day in the life of Tom de Sonia in 1996 compared to your life in the 60s.
Well, 1996, I'm retired,
Big different work rate, Tom.
Yeah.
How many hours a day did you work in them days? Daylight till dark, no doubt.
From 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at the night.
Yeah, I can recall where your factory is now. When we were children running around Palmyra, that used to be Connell's Dairy. That corner was a dairy. And
of course, before then we were, of course, we were in Stone Street, West Perth.
Yes.
Where the freeway.
Oh, I see. It was the Stone Street went when the freeway came in.
That's where the cup started.
That's where the cup started.
Yeah.
And Stone Street, we were there for 24 years. And Melbourne there, and the present factory, we shifted about in 1973.
Yes, it's a beautiful factory, isn't it?
Yeah.
In very, very, very good position.
Who lives in that house that's on the property, Tom?
At the moment, nobody, but in the past, my nephew lived.
It's empty now.
Empty.
Yeah?
Tell me, Tom, would you do it all over again?
Oh yes, why not?
Yeah, very, very hard work. Only you would realise the work that you put in.
Yeah.
And
my brother.
And your brothers and your family.
Your family.
You know what I mean? Your wife plays a big part in your life. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, Tom, I want to thank you and Peter for allowing me to interview you and Peter to do the interviewing.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank you on behalf of all soccer personnel in Western Australia. And I've been involved in Western Australian soccer since I was 6 years old, and that's 68 years. On behalf of us all, we thank you for your sponsorship for 35 years. Thank you and your family, because after all we consider it as a family concept, and all we can say is good health, and once again thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, my kids.
Oh, Tom, as a point of interest, when did you go back to Italy? No doubt you have been back.
Yeah.
And what was your reaction on when you got back?
Well, the first time I went back was 25 years after being in Australia. And I went back to particularly to see my mother. It's 25 years I haven't seen her, and it was really something beautiful. And I saw my mother, and then after that she died because she was pretty sick.
Oh, you went back in good time then,
Yeah.
Tom. You
Yeah.
didn't leave it too late,
No.
thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you find going back to Italy after Walloona and Perth?
Oh, it was very, very nice to see the old place again, and it hasn't changed very much. I could see what was before, and it was quite nice to see it.
Yes, and no doubt you've been back many times since.
Many times since.
Many
yes.
times since, yeah. Yeah, well, that's good, Tom. Anyhow, it's lovely to know that, anyhow, and once again, more than thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have already interviewed the administrative side of our game for our centenary year. So now let us have a talk about other aspects of our code. So important to our soccer industry is our referees, coaches, and how would the public be informed of soccer happenings without the press? All of these gentlemen that we are about to talk to have for years dedicated themselves to the sport they all love. Representing the referees, we have Tom Hitchcock. Tom was a very good referee in his day. Bob Watson, present secretary and also a good referee. We have Alec Mansfield. Alec, coach, player, you name it, and Alec's done it. John, our present director of coaching. And Frank Miller. Well, Frank goes back a long way to the press side of the game. Frank did an excellent job the years he was in it, and no doubt he's going to have some interesting things to tell us today. And doing the interviewing is Brian Beale. As each one has still been contributing to our game, Brian, having played in excess of 400 games for Spearwood, now Cockburn, has been associated with the game for around 40 years. So Brian, time for kick off.
Right, I'll ask the referees some questions first. And Tom, since you're the oldest, I'll ask you first. Tom, did you play the game before becoming a referee?
I did play it to a certain extent. We used to play for Beale Rovers Reserves after I joined the club in about 1949. But mostly I used to run the line, and a lot of referees in those days seemed to be impressed by my running the line, and they persuaded me to join the Referees Association, which I did in 1954.
Right. What about you, Bob? Did you play the game at all?
Yes, I was with Fremantle City, and which eventually amalgamated with Field Rovers to become Cockburn. I played one First Division game and played a few first team, but mostly reserves. I was a goal kicker basically.
And Tom, the conditions of a soccer referee in your area, would you compare them with today?
No.
How would you compare them?
To compare them today, there's no comparison really. In those days, you never got much paid for anything. You wouldn't get cover expenses compared to what the referees get today. Conditions, well, not many grounds were enclosed, and clubs had to take tins around just to get a bit of revenue. So there's a big, vast difference between refereeing then and now.
Have you got any comment on that, Bob?
Well, basically, would echo the sentiments.
there is an improvement in certain areas in the refereeing, but it's still got a long way to go with the attitude between clubs and referees.
Tom, could you tell us a bit about your soccer refereeing in WA and any incidences at all that happened?
Well, there was a breakaway from the association which became the federation, and I joined that body after a short time, which was to my advantage. I became the first division referee straight away, more or less, but I'd had a few years' experience, of course, before that. And to go on from there, the class of the game was pretty level in all clubs. There's only 10 teams in the first breakaway unit before they'd be amalgamated later on.
What about your life as a referee?
Well, I commenced refereeing in 1965 and retired at the end of the previous season, so I had 30 years as an active referee with the youth state. As I say, I did one first, and I also managed to do one first division game, but there's not been much in the way of highlights as far as from my own personal point of view.
Yeah. And Tom, could you name any good referees from the era when you played, when you refereed?
Well, there's a number of good referees around. There was referees like Rhys Hill, Andy Toppelberg, Ben O'Neill, Roy Stedman came into it after that after a while, and John Allen. They were all referees. They were good referees. There was a certain number of good referees around, and of course the rest were pretty even. I refereed for 20 years officially, and then I'd done another 7 years as a volunteer at times if somebody didn't turn up.
Was Ted Bude refereeing?
Oh, Ted Bude would be included in that for sure, yes.
Yeah. Can you name any, Bob?
Well, most of the ones that Tom has named I knew anyway. The current ones, you've got Barry Harwood, who was FIFA referee eventually. Andy Hassel was a good referee in his time. He's currently director of coaching. The top referee at this station is Eddie Lanning, who's recently been appointed to go to the Atlanta Olympics. So the opportunities now for referees in Australia is vastly improved to what it was when Tom and myself were initially refereeing.
Yeah. And even though you've retired, would you do it all over again?
No worries. No worries. I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah.
I met a lot of lovely people, a lot of good players, friendly people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have missed it for $100 or whatever. You know? I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What about you, Bob?
Yeah, I would do it again. On hindsight, it's a different approach. You might have had different results.
Yeah. Well, I think that covers the referee side of it. I think we'll get on to the coaches now. We've got Alex Mansfield and John Ward. Alec, I'll ask, because you're the oldest, I'll ask you first. You were West Australian captain coach 1948, is that right?
Yes.
In the Carnival side in Adelaide?
Yes, we had a pretty good side in that year. You must bear in mind that when I arrived here as a migrant in 1946, the standard of soccer wasn't very high at all. And after having witnessed some of the games and made a few comments about the game, one man came up to me and said, "Well, how would you like to coach us?" And that was at Woodville Reserve. Oh, I said, yes, I don't mind. And so he took me along and introduced me to all the boys of North Perth at the time. And I took up coaching club-wise in 1946. We didn't do much in that year, except that I had a lot of work to do because the foundation of the game was unknown. I'll give you an instance. When they were taking what I witnessed, which was early on in April 1946, North Perth were playing another team. I can't remember the other team, but everybody, when they kicked the ball, seemed to stop. They didn't move on, and I thought to myself, well, it's going to be hard coaching these people, because they didn't have the background that we enjoyed as European soccer players in the early days of our youth. We were kicking a ball, almost born with a ball, and the ball skills and the positional play was important, and it was not apparent at all in that year. So I joined them and I concentrated on positional play for them, ball control and passing, and alertness. In other words, when you're moving into attack, move quickly. Don't saunter up those paddock as you were doing in that year that I saw you in 46. Well, the boys knuckled under, North Perth boys, they knuckled under and they played exactly as I wanted them to. And we annexed 2 trophies, the first trophies that North Perth had ever won in that year of 1947. That was a pretty good year. And the following year, of course, we had the Carnival 1948.
Could you reminisce a bit on that? Who was some of the players and how did you go in that? I believe you won the Carnival in 1948.
Yes, we won the Carnival in 1948 because of our positional play. I concentrated on the boys making space as soon as we were in possession. And having concentrated on the alertness that they've got to apply all the time, not just for a couple of minutes in the game when they're involved on the ball, but when they're not involved on the ball, to get into the open spaces. When they are in defence and they get out of defence into attack, that they had to move quickly and they had to make space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the man in possession of the ball couldn't dispose of it.
Can you name of a few of the players that played?
Yeah,
Who scored the goals and who was your defenders?
Yeah, well, there was Ron Oswald in goal, who was in goals. He was a very good goalkeeper. Ron, he was very swift. He was an ex-Australian rules footballer. And I said to Ron, well, if you can't kick the ball, throw it. And he used to throw it quite a lot. And the thing that I was pleased with in that side was the fact that they did keep position very well, and they made space when we were in possession, and they came back. I think that that team responded very well to my coaching, and I was pleased when Alan, your father, scored 3 goals in the final game, I think it was, when we won 6-2.
Yeah.
And he played a good game on that day.
I believe he used to he used to play well with Bert Robinson.
Well, Bert Robinson was a ball holder, and he was in the team, so for the times when they weren't as quick getting into position as they should have been, and he was a good ball holder. And Bert used to distribute the ball very well indeed. Passing, accuracy of passing was a facet that some of the reporters in South Australia spoke about in their articles in the paper, and particularly the positional play.
Thanks very much for that, Alec. And what about you, John? You played the game. Where did you play it, and where did you start off your coaching?
Yeah, most of my playing was back in England, and I migrated to Sydney in '72, and I actually tried out with Western Suburbs Soccer Club, and the coach was taken ill, and asked me to take over the training, so I was only too happy to do that. And with Western Suburbs, we had 4 games to go, and we worked hard. I got the players a little bit fitter than they were, and we avoided relegation. They imported a coach from the UK, Mike Lang, and I was appointed as assistant. And I spent 4 years in Sydney coaching, and since then my coaching career has probably grown with the game. Since coming from Sydney in 1976, we decided to migrate across here because obviously my brother lives there, and I had a lot of good stories about the football over here and the good way of life. So and I was appointed coach at Kingsway Olympic. And in the 4 years I coached Olympic, we were successful in winning the league twice. The top four series 3 years on the trot. In 1980 we added the night series to the league and the top 4 cup, which culminated in 4 successful years. Following that I moved on to Queensland to coach the regional director of coaching full time. That lasted for 4 years and I came back to Perth. Before I went to Rockhampton in Queensland, I was appointed coach of the state team in 1979-1980. We played against such teams like Norwich City, Varda, the Northern Irish international team who were preparing for the 82 World Cup, AC Milan, and although we didn't have any victories.
You went well against all those sides, didn't you?
We went reasonably well with the players that we had and the standard of competition we had against us. The first game Varda was a 4-4 draw, and that was an exciting game played at Perth Oval. Johnny Davidson actually scored an hat-trick.
Yeah, I remember that game. He was best man on the park.
Yeah, it was an exciting game, and listening to the referees a little earlier on, sometimes the referees go against you, and being the home referees, and we had an incident where we were winning 4-3, and we had a corner against us, and one of our players was injured on the halfway line, and I think it was John Politic, who was a defender, and Buddy wouldn't let the train run to see to him, so they took the corner. We were down to 10 men virtually, and they scored the equaliser. The game against Northern Ireland, we lost it 4-0, and they were preparing for the World Cup, and they just finished a tour over the eastern states where they played against Australia. That was a good experience for the players. We were 2-0, they got 2 goals early in the game, and then they got 2 just before the end of the game. And one of the things I learned after the game is that the coach of Bingham gave his players instructions to go out and get 2 early goals, and then when you've got the 2 early goals, just play the ball around, and really that's what they did. But it was a good exhibition. I think the players would have learnt a lot from it. One incident from that game, I took Gordon McCulloch off, and coming off the field he says to me, "Why'd you take me off? I haven't nutmegged him yet." So you could see he was out for a bit of fun. He wasn't out there to win the game, because obviously losing at that stage. But the players enjoyed themselves, and I'm sure they learnt a lot. The game against AC Milan, they were cruising at 3-0 AC Milan, and I made a change, put Frank Smellery on. With about 15 minutes to go, and all of a sudden we got 2 goals and we were back in the game, so it really livened the last 15 minutes of the game, and that was quite an interesting game. The game against Red Star was a completely different story. They came and they replayed this game at the Velodrome, and people talk about the Velodrome being a small pitch, but gee, they ran everywhere and they did everything. Once they played the ball, they just made forward runs, and it went to a third man who played into the space, and they were on the end of the ball every time, and they actually handed us 5-0. And at the end of that game I was walking off the field, and it must have been a WA supporter come up to me and said, "That was a disgraceful performance." And what could I do? I just held my hands up and said, "But they're a good team, aren't they, that we played against?" He said, "Oh, we should have beat them." So it was good that we had some support, and it was disappointing.
And how do you think the future of WA soccer is going, John? And do you think the game has changed over the time you've been coaching?
I think it's changed in some areas. It certainly hasn't developed in other areas. I think in administration it hasn't really developed. We probably have more full-time administrators in the game now than we ever have had. The biggest problem that we are having is that the volunteers are having all the say and all the power, and we can't change that at the present time. And I think if the volunteers listen to the professional people who are being paid to do a job, we may advance the game a little bit further there. From the playing side, there were certainly good players around, and there were certainly characters around when I was coach of the state team at the time I coached Kingsway Olympic. Having been away for 4 years and come back, I've seen the game decline for various reasons. I think one of the main reasons would be the fact that now players are going over to East to play, the Robbie Dunns, the Davy Jones, the Stan Lazaridis, Gary Morocchi. All of these fellas have had to go to the eastern states to get international recognition to play for their country. They've achieved that, and I think now the follow-up is a lot of players have gone to Europe, and Stan Lazaridis, Tony Carboni, being 2 local players who've learnt all the soccer in WA, actually going across and now making a living in England. And I think that's some of the great differences. The game is at probably an all-time low. We've got a 10-team competition, and there's not enough good players at the present time going around to make it a really strong competition and a competitive competition.
Alec, have you got any incidents that you can bring up, things that happened that were different, you know, were controversial or like that? With umpires, with referees and that, you know what I mean?
Not really. I don't remember any incidents involving players that gave the game a bad name here. I don't know any incidents that I could speak about that happened during my coaching years here. I was 14 years coaching in various clubs, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I have a pension for coaching, not only in soccer but other fields too. But no, I can't remember any instance whatsoever that could be of note or use in the future. I mean, the idea that I have is whatever we do from now on, there's got to be the plus side of it. And I think the only thing that happened during my coaching career was that the association opted for a seminar at the UWA for the sports masters of high schools, and they asked me to conduct it, and I did. But I never ever heard the result of that seminar. It involved men who, in other sports, have been most successful, one of whom was a national swimming coach only a few years ago. And for us to survive, we must place more emphasis on school soccer. I keep calling it football, you know why, but I find that you've got to have a source where you're going to have a situation where you've got a source of supply of youngsters. And I don't see anything in the papers that gives me any hope. Are there any leagues, can anybody tell me, are there any leagues that have been formed in the high schools or the state schools to compare in some way with all the European programs? I think that we must, in my eyes as a coach, we must keep feeding the senior teams, and the only way we can feed them is breed them.
Yeah,
the
John,
only way you can feed them is in the school.
John could probably answer that one.
Yeah, I think in the UK where the development programs are run through the FA schools, Football Association schools, in Australia it's a little bit different, it's run through the community. But there's a John Curtin Senior High School, which is a special school, and Peter Rickers, who's the head coach there, is also the secretary of the schools association, and they do run a competition for boys and for girls, Year 8s and Year 11 and 12s. They've been very successful probably in the build-up over the last 6 or 7 years. Now that's become a fairly big competition. It wasn't played last year because of the teachers' strike, but the state team play, and they do have a state schoolboys competition which is played annually towards the end of the season. So to answer your question, yes, there is a schools development programme. We now look as though we're going to be up to over 8,000 juniors playing the game this year in the community system through the clubs. And those numbers are on the increase again. I remember in the 70s and the early 70s there was 10,000 juniors playing. That's declined, but now that's come back. We've now got Roo Ball, which is a modified game. That's the one for the grassroots level and for the primary kids, school kids to play. That's proven to be successful. This year we've got a girls team playing in the under-12 division. That's another plus that we've got. Women's soccer is growing, so I think the game is growing. It just needs a bit of guidance and a bit more development in the players' career path and the coaches' career path.
Yeah. We seem to have a big dropout right through from when I can remember when I was playing juniors. There's a big percentage that seem to drop out. I think it's because of our Australian lifestyle. I think.
Well, the records show that, or the research shows that people don't drop out of sport, they change.
Yeah.
And I think soccer being a safe sport at the junior level every parent wants their kid to kick a soccer ball because it's supposed to be non-contact, non-physical, and a lot of the football players have learnt their skills through initially playing soccer. So we are doing a service to the community, if not for our own sport, but we are still producing players who can go on and compete on the world surface.
I think if this national side can hit it off, well then players like Cockburn and that will have something to strive for and they won't have to go away.
Exactly.
You know,
yeah.
So I think it'll be a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think we've covered it pretty well, Alec and John. Thanks very much on the coaching side of it. Now we've got Mr. Frank Miller down the end. Frank, you must have some wonderful things to tell us about the press. So could you tell us about the life of a WA soccer reporter?
Well, Brian, I came out here in 1947 and I was only 18 at the time. And of course I was mad keen on playing soccer, which I did and played in the first division here at the time. And I had 3 seasons in the first division with Balmoral, and we finished runners-up in 49 with 2 Callies. But I had to give it away because I did a cartilage in a game, and that's how I became interested in the media. And I started to write soccer for the West Australian in 1951, and I continued there for 10 years, and then I did 10 years with the Daily News, and I also did the initial work with the ABC, both on radio and television here. But if you want me to mention briefly, or as briefly as I can, some of the history in the 50s and 60s, is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, during your time as a reporter, yeah.
Good.
And some of the games that you covered and any interesting moments.
Yeah. Well, soccer of course here boomed in the early 50s after the war with migration, and the interest in it boomed. Crowds were quite big during the first division matches in 52, 53, 54. In 1953, which was the year that the controlling body here at that time obtained the use of Bayswater Oil for the first time, we used to get crowds there of over 4,000 people quite regularly. And the interest, of course, was in the club rivalry that took place between Missouri in particular, of course, which was a well-known side at that time, and North Perth and Perth City, teams like Spearwood, the Swan teams, Athletic and Swan Valley, and Tricolore, of course, came into it eventually, and that club rivalry stimulated soccer here considerably, and the media interest in it increased. It took several years, but eventually in the 50s the Daily News took an interest in it, and while they didn't have a full-time soccer person, some of their feature writers used to write on soccer, especially when it was a bit controversial, of course. And certainly we had some controversies, of course we did, from time to time. It's part of life, isn't it? Controversy, and it's certainly part of soccer. And the keen competition that took place in the 50s between the like of North Perth and Missouri and Perth City was the reason for controversy occurring from time to time. The media, of course, were always interested in anything controversial, and we used to write stories on what occurred. There were quite a number of incidents at games. There was a game at Dorian Gardens in 1952, to highlight one of them, in which a spectator ran onto the field and attacked Ken Day, the North Perth goalkeeper, and Teddy Hugo was, as he was then, Teddy Bude, was the referee at the time, and he had quite a job sorting that out, and eventually he sent Scarangella, the Missouri captain, and Day off the field for the incident that caused the spectator to run on, I suppose. But then, of course, the spectator should never have run on. We then had the Board of Control, rather foolishly, awarding the game which Missouri had won, 3-1 I think it was, awarding it to North Perth. I thought it was foolish at the time. And they went through a long cycle of appeals and protests and all sorts of procedures, and eventually locally they had to re-award the game back to the winning team, Missouri, so it all came back to square one in the finish. But that was a major controversy that lasted for the whole of the season, off and on. There are quite a few others, or were quite a few others, particularly towards the end of that year, when North Perth played Missouri in some of the cup matches that they played. I remember one at Bassendean Oval where the crowd had intervened because there were no police present, and there was quite a bit of controversy over that. Somebody that Alec has mentioned, Bert Robertson, was sent off the field, and so was one of the Missouri players, Joe Scrabble, and they were suspended subsequently, and that caused a bit of a furore, of course. But there were lots of incidents of that nature throughout the game. There always is, there always will be. You get them occurring everywhere, don't you? They occurred last season in the UK when the Kung Fu expert took to the fence on the spectator. You'll always have them. So that's nothing unusual about it, and there's nothing unusual for the media to be interested in them. But that rivalry in the 50s was very keen, and eventually there were quite a number of ethnic clubs playing in WA. By 1957 there were 38 senior clubs altogether in the state, and that included, of course, Missouri and Tricolore in the first division, Olympic, Shamrock, Windmills, Cracovia and Aurora in the second, Athena and Bastisi in the third, and Kiev, Vala, Julia and Vitesse in the fourth division, which probably for the period that I can cover, which is for 25 years from 48 to 72, was the largest number of clubs that existed in WA, that's senior clubs. Bayswater Oval was a boon to the sport as an enclosed ground. It eventually had something to do with the breakaway, of course, in 1960, because the clubs became unhappy about having to give up a lot of their income from their home games, and they weren't too happy about that. And it was one of the reasons why the breakaway took place. It's worth mentioning in 1954 WA's performance in the Interstate Carnival, and this was a full state carnival. 5 states took part. We won 3 games, drew 1 and lost 1, and the team we had in that carnival was quite a good team to perform in that manner. The only game we lost was 1-0 to New South Wales, which was the premier soccer state, as it more often than not has been. Other highlights in the 50s were the visits of the international teams Rapid of Vienna in 1955, Ferencváros, the Hungarian side, in 1957, and Hearts, the Scottish team which had won the Premiership in Scotland the year before, in 1959. They won fairly easily here, these sides, although our team was gradually improving. Rapid won 6-1, Ferencváros won 6-1, and Hearts won quite easily 10-1. Hearts played an Australian 11 in Perth a few days before they played the state side, and they beat the Australian 11 9-0 at that particular time. But then Hearts had a good team at that time: Willie Bald and Ian Crawford and Hamilton, and they had some very good strikers at that particular time. Missouri was the most successful team in WA during the period that I covered soccer. They won 23 major trophies altogether. They won the Premiership 7 times. They won the main cup, which changed its name, of course, from time to time, from Charity Cup to Association Cup, etc. They won that 10 times, and they won the top 4 6 times. North Perth won the Premiership 5 times. They won the main cup 5 times, and they won the the top four 3 times, and then Tricolore won the Premiership 6 times, and the main cup 5 times, and the top four 3 times. So these 3 clubs really dominated during the 50s and the 60s. And in the 60s, of course, we had a lot of visits from overseas teams, including Everton, Torpedo, Chelsea, Roma, Manchester United, of course, New Zealand, Cardiff, Greece, Hertha, Inter Bratislava, Dynamo came a couple of times, Moscow Dynamo, Manchester City, FC Zurich, Kossis, and an English FA team. We had a swag of them in the 60s, and particularly in 1970 when there were 4 different overseas teams came here. And we had some draws against them. We didn't win a game, but we drew with Manchester City 1-1. We drew with Zurich to the same score, and we drew with Hertha 2-all. We lost to Manchester United 7-0, but that was understandable because Bobby Charlton and Dennis Law, who got sent off by Roy Steadman. He was playing, however, for a period in the game.
They had George Best,
and they also had George Best here. So there's every reason why we lost that particular game. But still, we had quite a good stateside in the 50s and in the 60s, and the 60s were notable too for WA going to Malaysia and playing in the Merdeka tournament over there. And they did quite well at times. They finished 3rd one year. They didn't do so well in the other years that they went there, but notwithstanding they did reasonably well.
Pretty well then, Frank. So I think with that we'll just close it down.
Yeah, well the thing is, Brian, is general discussion. Is there any questions want to be asked, or you want to talk between one another, or that's entirely up to you, gentlemen.
Well, a pattern emerges as Frank has related, and it was due to many things, but mostly it was due to the numbers of migrants that we were getting into Western Australia, which hitherto were going to the eastern states. We got a very, very small allotment of migrants in Western Australia. But as the years went by, and we went from the late 40s to the 50s to the 60s, the migration scheme was stepped up considerably, and it gave us a lot more in Western Australia, which meant that we possibly would get a goodly supply of European youngsters coming out with their mums and dads who we could make use of in the future for our soccer. I think that had a big bearing on the increase in the form of the various club teams and the state teams during that period. You will notice by the scores that have been read out to you that in the beginning our team was playing against hardened, polished professionals that were brought to Australia to show people what the game was really like. Now, the team that I had in that disastrous year of 1949, when we lost 13-0 and 14-0 to Red Star, was made up purely of amateurs who only trained on the night time twice a week. The rest of the day they had to go and earn their daily living, whereas we were playing against professionals who were hardened and polished and very good indeed, and it was like pitting David with Goliath, except that we as David didn't have a sling to throw at Goliath. So I think that had a big bearing on the increase of form, better arrangements for soccer, better balls to play with, better footwear to wear, all had a bearing on the alteration and the increase in form of our teams during that latter period. And it was good to see. We were losing only by a small margin, except in cases that Frank has related, where you get incidents which do upset people. They don't seem to upset professionals so much because that's their game. But it does upset amateurs who are not used to that sort of thing. Now I think that contributed a lot to our rise in those years from the late 40s to 60. I don't know much about after 60 because I retired from the game. But I have kept up with all the things that have been happening here, except the one question I asked tonight of what was happening in the schools, because it's from there that we get our players from. Being so far away from everybody else, being lacking in finance, we're not in the race to compete with the eastern states or overseas clubs. If we can get money here, then we can do something.
Yeah, I think in those eras that Frank mentioned, there was some very good players that had matched their own in soccer here today. But I think the big difference was the style of play. In those days, you played the WM system with your inside forwards and wing halves, but today it's more defensive. So if you play a defensive style of game, you can cut out the really professional sides. They can't score as many goals because you're blocking it out. And you can remember your days, Alec. You were centre half. You'd be centre half on your own. You wouldn't have a sweeper covering you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in that line, but I still think that we weren't ready to take on the cream of Europe at the times that we did. Now, it's all very well to have these teams come over and show us how the game is played, but it's disastrous to be massacred to the extent of some of the games.
Yeah.
It's not good for our ego at
Yeah.
all. And so I thought that and did mention it quite a lot to the Border Control, that we should have more teams visit us and play against us, such as were the South Africans. Now the and the Chinese and some of the Malaysian clubs that have come over. I thought it would have been more of an advantage for us to play against those teams because they weren't so polished in professionalism as were the Europeans.
Yeah, I think the game's changed. It's become more scientific. It's interesting to say people will get off the boat and they come and play the next day. Here you have to model them first before they play, and they're probably only holding around there saying, how much are you going to pay me? And I just wondered about the finances of the game in the early days. I mean, did you get paid or?
No, there was no payment made in any team that I played for because I didn't hold with it for a start. I didn't think that any one man in a team was worth more than the other. I built a team around teamwork, and so there was no necessity to pay him. But that did creep into it, John. It crept into the game, and it was disheartening to see a man who virtually was carrying the team in defence, getting less money than the man who was trying to score goals in front. Now it was a teamwork, and that's what I insisted on in all my coaching years, that it was a team effort. And they had to toe the line if they didn't contribute.
What I thought was a shame, Frank mentioned North Perth. They were a top side here in the 50s and early 60s. North Perth and Missouri. But then when money came into it, Frank, that was North Perth went by the wayside.
Yeah, I guess that's quite right, Brian. There was money in it in the 50s, probably around about the mid-50s it came in. And you saw this with players changing clubs, particularly top players, and several of them played for a number of clubs over the years. You've only got to contemplate the like of Ron himself, Ron Adair, who played for 4 clubs that I can remember.
Yeah. Played for Australia too.
Yeah. In the local sphere, he played with Swan Athletic, Missouri, North Perth, and
in Australia.
somebody else, I forget who it was now.
He plays for Australia too, Frank.
Oh yes, he played.
Yeah.
He was the first West Australian to play for Australia.
Just
he played against the Chinese team in Adelaide.
Just getting back to John in relation to money, in the last interview with the administration, some of the club's turnover in the late 40s and 50s was £197 a year. That was their club turnover, so it'll give you some idea of how things have changed. I mean, so a player probably wouldn't play for that amount of money today, but of course that was pounds, not dollars.
I mean, for £1 then you buy a lot, you know.
But I think in those days, if I remember rightly, and Bob might know something about it, some players, if they had a good butcher in the club, a lot of them were getting some good meat and that. And that's the way some of them were getting paid, not by cash, by
You're talking about meat, Tom. I can tell a little incident back in the early 50s when Fremantle played Perth on the Fremantle Oval. I was captain coach of the Fremantle side, and it was my job to do the organisation of the Fremantle side. And at that particular time, the chap by the name of Burton had a butcher shop out South Fremantle. He was the chief organiser of the game. And for all my work, I went down and presented him with what was required and so forth at the end of it all. He thanked me very much. He said, "Here's a roll of beef." That was my job, that was me pay. Now, I think that's about the only payment I've ever had in 500 games of playing football. Yeah.
Well, there was an imbalance in soccer here over the variety of teams. I was approached by quite a few of the clubs to coach them. No money was ever mentioned to me, and I never took any. But I did have this in mind. As I said early on, I have a penchant for coaching. I like coaching. And I wanted to have more teams have the benefit of what I could give them. And so I took on coaching such teams. After North Perth and Perth City, I coached Maccabeans. They rose from the second division into the first division. I coached South Fremantle, who did the same. And I thought that if I could distribute my knowledge to those other clubs, we would get a better balance of soccer. It worked, but it didn't continue to work, unfortunately. And so I finished up with Zuri, who it was a pleasure to coach. They were a good side. We won the premiership in 1959. I think it was the last time under Wazza that the premiership was won. And we were laying fourth in the 1960 when the Federation and took over from the Wazza. I retired then. I was 40 and I think I'd give it coaching and playing away. I was getting a bit behind the youngsters who were in front of me all the time.
Well, chaps, I think we've pretty well covered everything. So I think I'll wind up by thanking you all. Thank you, Brian, for your interviewing. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Alan. Enjoyed coming here today.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Alec.
Thank you, Alan, for inviting me.
Thank you, John.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Frank.
Pleasure, Alan.
Once again, I thank you all for coming, and I'm pretty happy to know that this will come out very well, and thank you for your contribution for our 100th year. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Today, the 30th of March 1996, our 100th year of WA soccer. Today we're at Langley Park. The reason I'm filming, two reasons I'm filming here. The Blue and Gold is the club I started with well over 60 years ago. Then later it was called Spearwood, and we changed its name to Cockburn to be a regional name. But in the background here is where the first official games of soccer were played on Perth Esplanade. This is Langley Park, which is an area just a little further up towards the causeway, where today there's over 1,000 children playing soccer. And isn't that marvellous? Well done.
Oh, he's moving for Luke.
As you can see, we're right on the Swan River. City of Perth. Couldn't get much closer, could you? Isn't it lovely to see all these children playing soccer? Centenary year, 1996. Langley Park, Perth. I have with me Peter Burke. Peter, I would say, is one of the top administrators that we have in the state, and he has devoted many years of his life to junior soccer. I'm going to ask Peter just to fill me in on the past and the present, as to the extent of the juniors have changed, the amount of personnel playing, etc., etc. So what can you tell me, Pete?
It's a pleasure to be here, first of all, Alan, and thanks for the opportunity. Alan, we were incorporated in 1972, that's the Junior Soccer Association of Western Australia, and at that stage we had probably about 18 teams registered statewide. Today, if I can bring some comparisons into play, we now have more than 700 teams registered statewide, or metropolitan areas, sorry I should say, and almost 1,000 teams statewide. On top of this, that equals a number of about 12,000 junior soccer players here in Western Australia. Lately, and I'm referring to the time when I came on board, we have started development programs right throughout every metropolitan primary school. We have more sponsorship coming into the game than nearly any other area or any other code. We have started to progress with development officers. We've started to progress with administration and coaching development plans. And in total, I would say that, modestly, I would say that some of our plans have been used to well, really, our plans have been used as the groundwork for many other sports to develop their own codes here in Western Australia.
That's excellent, Pete. I can recall going to a meeting, an AGM, in the 15th of November 1964, when Tricolour moved a motion for Bastarby for the juniors to be their own concept, because up till then it was Bastarby being run by the seniors. Spearwood, who I was a delegate, seconded the motion. And then Spearwood moved the motion that the formation of the first junior official committee which run their own affairs, and that was back in 15th of November 1964. And I can see, as you said, it was firmly acknowledged further in the 1970s, but only looking around here today, I think it's a credit to yourself and your staff as to how we have progressed junior-wise. Now all we've got to do is get that put through to the senior-wise.
Well, exactly. Back in 1964, it was probably a 6-board voluntary committee.
It was a seven board voluntary.
Right, and on top of that now, we are looking at Western Australia having a 12-member committee running junior soccer, still voluntary, but we employ a full-time state administrator, a full-time general manager, we have a state development officer, and on top of all of that, we have 6 roving development officers. So not only have we improved or increased the number of voluntary directors on the junior boards, we are still an incorporated autonomous entity, and as such keep our own financials, we keep our own registrations, and have progressed the game, hopefully feeding the juniors into senior ranks for future years.
Yeah, that's marvellous, Peter, and all I can say is thanks for spending the time to have a talk to us, and let's hope that, and I'm sure that we're going to go to bigger and better things.
Thanks very much, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
Cheers.
I have with me here John Appleby. John is Chief Executive of the Amateurs, and I can assure you he's doing an excellent job in his profession. John, what can you fill me in about the Amateurs for history?
Well, I suppose if we start at the present time, Alan, we've now got over 3,000 registered players, and they are playing in Masters, social divisions, and of course from Premier through to 5th Division amateurs, and we have a youth league as well. So something like 216 teams. Interestingly enough, 1996 is the 20th anniversary of one of the components of WASA, which was an organisation called PASA, and it was primarily developed from a business house type competition 20 years ago, and in fact the remnants of that organisation have asked us to make our social cup this year an anniversary cup for PASA. They amalgamated with another amateur group that had developed through the 60s and 70s, which was called ASA, Amateur Soccer Association of WA, to form the current West Australian Amateur Soccer Association. I guess today it's a lot different to 20, 30 years back when amateurs were most probably just that. There has been, as in all sports, a clouding of the amateur professional status, and we can only hope that the amateur status stays with us, because it is an area where young people can aspire to learn the trade before moving into higher divisions.
Yeah, I think myself that you do a marvellous job because let's face it, up till the 50s everything was basically amateur, and when the professionalism came in, I think the amateurs played a big part there, as you just said, in bringing players through for the professional ranks.
Well, at the moment our professional ranks are in the vicinity of say 1,200 players, half of whom are on some contract basis, whereas the amateurs do provide a big number of people the opportunity of playing our game. And I think we're finding in the 90s now, with the explosion of interest in the game, that I am constantly being contacted by people who want to rekindle the old interests that they had as kids and then went away for whatever reason, so they're coming back a little bit older and fitting into an amateur rank that is maybe not as demanding as the professional side of the game.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jenny. Thank you, John, very much for your time this morning, and we know and wish well the future of the amateurs.
You're very welcome, Alan, and I thank you for doing this. It's an exciting year because as far as our organisation is concerned, this element of history gives us something to build on, and it's been an exciting year so far.
Yes, there's certainly a lot happening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Good.
I have with me here Gary Marocchi. Now, Gary is a true West Australian. He's achieved the world. I say that because he could not gain any higher honour than playing for his country. Gary has been an excellent coach over the years with Perth, but don't let me talk about it. Let Gary tell us. So tell us all about your history of your game from juniors, Gary.
Well, and I was born in Perth, very close to Doreen Gardens. My four brothers, we all played for Perth Azuri Junior Soccer Club. It was only about 400 metres away from home. We grew up there, we played there. From there I played in the juniors from, say, under 10s to under 16s. I progressed into the seniors at Perth Azuri, and while I was there I was selected in the Australian under 23 team, and from there I went to Adelaide to play for Adelaide City, and also played for the national team at the same time. I had 7 good years in Adelaide. I came back to Perth, played for Perth Azuri. I had a year at Inglewood Kiev, went back to Perth Azuri, then Perth Italia was formed. Played 2 years there, then I retired as a player, and then started up coaching with Perth Italia under 18s for 2 years. Then I had the senior team for 3 consecutive years and won the championship for 3 years. I was also the state coach at that time, the coach of the Perth Kangaroos that played in Singapore, which was very successful. And last year I had a stint with the ITC, which is the Youth Development Program, and this year I'm currently the coach of Perth Glory in the National League next year.
And the future of Gary Marocchi is coach at Perth Glory?
Well, we hope that it's going to be an exciting era for soccer in Western Australia, and I hope to be able to contribute something back into the Perth Glory team and have a team that's going to be well respected throughout Australia.
Yeah. In your playing days with Perth Azuri, they were happy days, weren't they, Gary?
They were certainly happy days. I played with some very good players of the past. Alan Cooney, Peter Holt, Dave Brady, Brian Newell, all very successful players in their own time. I was a very young player at that time, and they certainly helped me along in my game.
That's excellent. Well, all I can say, Gary, thank you for the interview, and all the success in the world with Perth Glory, because we will all be 100% behind you.
Thanks very much, Al.
Thanks, Gary.
You get on with your job.
I have with me here Mel Moffat. Mel, for many years now, has been handling the press for the West Australian on soccer, and I notice he's also on other sports, but we're mainly concerned about the soccer. And also John O'Connell. John, great player in his day, played for one or two clubs in the metropolitan area, and now he's more or less the administrator in charge of our 100th year celebrations. But firstly, Mel, fill me in on your job as a press man.
Well, I've been working for the West Australian newspaper now since 1981. I took over doing soccer reporting in 1990 from the previous doyen, David Andrews. But before that, I had been reporting soccer in Ireland, Scotland, England. I travelled all over Europe with the Irish international team, and those were great days. And I think with a bit of luck, we'll see some good days ahead here in Perth with the advent of the Perth Glory. Apart from doing soccer, I do other sports. I do a bit of golf, some athletics, swimming, etc. A lot of other sports, but soccer is my main passion, and I think that it's going to get bigger and bigger as the years go on.
Well, I think that the opportunity is there for it to get bigger as long as we administrate it correctly, Mel, don't you?
Yes, I think that's, you're dead right there, Alan. The administrative side of things seems to have been the big problem, the major problem, certainly since I've been involved since 1990. I've seen a lot of upheavals at administrative level. Hasn't been good for the game, not good for the image of the game, but they seem to be getting their act together now with great guys like John here leading the way. Hopefully things will get even better, and I'm sure they will, because there's a lot of people, as you can see here today. I mean, there's a few thousand people here today for the centenary. And if you can capture that audience on a more permanent basis, then soccer, I think, will go ahead in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, thanks, Mal. John, what have you got to say about what's happening? A little bit about your career, where you came from and who you played with, and also what's happening for the centenary year.
Well, originally I came from Liverpool, Alan, and my first team actually was probably one of the early teams of soccer here in Western Australia, which is ironical now that we're celebrating our 100 years this year, Swan Valley. And up there in the valley, of course, there was Swan Valley, Swan Athletic. And in the early days, all amateur, I might add as well, we didn't get paid. The only things we ended up coming home with was watermelons, grapes, and a few bottles of wine from the vineyards up there. Of course, all the support base came from there. And as I progressed, windmills, Morley Windmills, played for the state team, had the honour of playing over 45 games for the state. So I did 3 trips to Asia representing WA. And also then got into the media, which I found very, very interesting, radio, and pretty pleased with the way that's gone. Still doing that at the moment, 990 AM and 100 FM in your part of the country, Alan, down Fremantle Way. But now into administration, and as Mel said, probably been a problem over the years. But that hasn't been helped maybe with the profile of the game. I think the profile of the game has been probably closeted for too long. When you compare with other sports, what they do, they're quite happy to bring out front their icons, the great names in their sport, and I think soccer probably hasn't done this over the years. So this year, the 100th year, the centennial year, we're looking to address those kind of problems, and you'll find this has been the start of part of our celebrations. As Mel said, there's over 2,000 people down here today, and probably be more as the day goes on. And we've got a number of events coming up preceding this one, which we'll certainly highlight in the media and profile. One of them, which you'll be involved in, Alan, as part of a committee that will be looking to induct a Hall of Fame for some of soccer's greats here in Western Australia. And probably that's an area that we've never considered over the years. So that's going to be one of our major tasks. We'll culminate that with probably a big function towards the end of the year, and on the advice of a committee that's been set up to have a look at some of the
great contributors to the game over the years. We will induct people into the Hall of Fame and hope that will be an ongoing thing as years go on. And also we'll be looking at recognising some of the great players who've come from WA over the years, played for WA and also played for Australia. So we've got an enormous task in front of us, small budget, but at the same time I think lots of enthusiasm, and as Mel said earlier, I think administrators really have to be aware of what their role is when things like this come along, and make the extreme effort to make sure that it's successful. And if today's anything to go by, it's very encouraging, and I think some of the events that we have lined up for the rest of the year will certainly be of great value to the game, and let's hopefully secure the future for all these children who are down here today.
Good, John, that was covered very well. Now, thank you for your time. Thank you, Mal, for your time. And all I can say is thank you very much, and I wish you both well for the future.
Will you be sending the fee in the post, will you?
No worry at all, John. No worry at all.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Tremendous.
The stickers going strong after 100 years. The Great Soccer Celebration, Langley Park, Saturday, March 30th, 10 a.m. Come and join us.
Alan.
It was said that on the 14th of May, 1896, a meeting was convened at the United Services Club in St. George's Terrace, and from that meeting emerged the beginning and playing of the world's greatest game here in Perth, international football. 100 years on in 1996, it's still the world's #1 sport, and the world has come to Perth to play. A centenary of excellence played by proud West Australians. Soccer, a great Australian sport. Good on ya, Blue. And WA soccer is no exception. Since its humble beginning in 1896, soccer in Western Australia has contributed enormously to the sporting prowess of our great state. Now, 100 years on in...
Tom Hitchcock. Now, Tom was on the other night on the referee side of the game, and there's one or two little points of interest that Tom would like to let us know about. So what have you got to tell us, Tom?
Oh, with the advent of the breakaway, 10 clubs forming the West Australian Soccer Federation, they had a lot of trouble with referees, of course, because association referees could not referee federation games. They had a couple of lower division referees who joined them straight away, and after a few months I joined them as well. And of course they still did not have a referees association in the federation, so I was asked to form one. And with a few other referees coming in, like Ben Owen and a few other good referees, it became a good federation. And as time went by, I could see that a few other clubs were going to join the federation, so I could see no point in having two referees associations. So I initiated a meeting with Judge Sterner, and we managed to have a meeting amongst all the referees with Stan Beale as chairman, as a neutral chairman, and out of that we formed one body. And being the president of the Federation referees, we all had to stand for the body's administration members. And Roy Stedman was duly elected as president on one vote, and I gave him that one vote. But we proceeded from then on, and it became a good federation. Soccer referees, and the game proceeded and got better from then on.
Yes, I don't think it's ever looked back either on the referee side of it, Tom. We've got some excellent referees, as we had then. I'll tell you a little story. We were playing back in, I would suppose it would be in the early 50s. We were a first division side, and Queen's Park at that particular time was a third division side, and we were, the ground, well, it was absolutely waterlogged. There wouldn't have been 30 square metres on the ground that was not underwater. So naturally, them days the refs used to do 2 games. You know, I don't know what they did in your early days. Did you do 2 games in your early days?
Yeah.
They used to do either a reserve or a junior game, and then they'd come and do the senior game. Well, this particular time, the ref, he was soaking wet from, because it was pouring with rain, soaking wet with the reserve game. So naturally the Spearwood boys said, oh look, this is too dangerous to play, we don't want to play. So needless to say, the reserve game finished, and I went out with the captain of Queen's Park to see the referee, and I said, "Ref, don't you think it's too dangerous to play?" Well, naturally, the referee, absolutely soaking wet from the first game, so the second game possibly didn't worry him too much. And then I said, "So what do we do, Ref?" He says, "You'll play." So by that stutter, you can bet your life most would know who that referee was Barney Francis. Now, Barney Francis of the day was one of our real top referees. Terrific bloke and a darn good referee. But needless to say, so we had to get stripped. We played the game. Minutes to go. There was no score. And lucky enough, we scored. And that was, and unfortunately, they lost their best player with a busted collarbone. He was out for most of the season. So Queen's Park missed out on the day. But that was one of many, many incidents, Tom, that maybe a bit before your day even, Barney Francis.
Well, exactly. There was many instances during my day, and over the years I had the pleasure of refereeing many cup finals, some interstate matches, and some visiting teams from other countries coming in. And to me, it was a great experience, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I'm not sorry that I ever did it. It was great. 27 years I was refereeing, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, well, it's very good, Tom. Thanks for giving us that bit of information. Anyhow, Tom, after all, this tape was mainly on the history of our 100 years, and any happenings whatsoever, we're only too pleased to tape them, so we've got them for record. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Alan. Enjoyed it.
I have with me here in my book one of the greatest gentlemen that's ever pulled a boot on to play soccer in Western Australia. I had the privilege of playing many games with Bert. First he was Beale and then with the state side. Now Bert, we want a little bit of your history to go in this tape, and firstly, when did you arrive in WA and with what clubs did you play for?
Yes, well, I arrived permanently in WA in 47, but of course I was out here in 44 with the Navy, the submarine fleet at Fremantle. And we had the Canaries playing then, and we made quite a lot of money for charity, and we had a wonderful time. And then I came back, met my wife, and she come across this Dundee, and we came back here in 47. My eldest boy was just 6 months when we arrived here, and we had our 50th wedding anniversary 3 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations for 3 weeks ago, Bert.
The eldest boy, he did play soccer for Tricolore, and he was in the state squad, but unfortunately, well, fortunately and unfortunately, he got a Rhodes Scholarship and went over to England for 3 years. So that was the finish of his soccer career. He played Australian rules up at Connemara and Meriden. But my first games out here, I was down in the Esplanade, and I met Alec Marr from the Caledonians, and I said, "Is there any chance of getting a game?" And he said, "Can you play?" I said, "Well, I played out here with the Canaries." He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Bert Robertson." He said, "But you're not Bert Robertson." I said, "Well, if that's the way you want it, not." So I met some Spearwood chaps there, and they asked me if I'd like to play for them, and we played in the final of the cup the following week on the Esplanade. Unfortunately, we got beaten 2-1 that day. It was quite a good game.
And you can remember your mate them days, Frank Reid.
Oh,
Frank was with Callies.
Frank come out in on the same ship as I, the Asturias.
As a matter of fact, the chap that chatted you into coming into school was no other than my dad, Bert. Because in my book, that was a windfall. Yeah. Now, what about the clubs you played with here, Bert, and what were your impressions?
I played with the North Perth because it was the handiest team for me, because I was living in William Street, and then they were playing up in North Perth there, and Woodville Reserve at the time. And of course, when we got a bit stronger, we said, well, why should Perth City be getting all the money around the town? So we applied to the council to share Esplanade with Perth City.
Oh, that was good.
And then from there, I went away with the state team in 48 over to Adelaide. And chap said to me, "How would you like a job down at the power station?" So I got down there around the power station. I used to work on Saturdays. I said, "Oh." So I got a game for Fremantle City to play there for a season while I God.
Sorted yourself out.
Well, it was very good because I could work up until 1 o'clock and then go and play. Somebody would pick me up down at the power station and take me to the game, wherever the games were.
Oh, that's so interesting. What about your coaching in your junior days, Bert?
Well, we never had really any coaching in the junior days. We learned our game by going and watching the senior teams playing, like at Dundee United, Rangers, and all these teams that come into Dundee. And of course we played from morning, noon and night. When we were kids, Mother had to come and get you to go to bed. We'd be playing with the ball. If it was raining, we'd be playing headers in the close, right up until we wouldn't go out the weekends or that without carrying a ball with us. I mean, and I think that playing with a tennis ball, playing with that, give you a bit of skill.
What do you think about the equipment today, Bert, compared to your day?
Well, everything's so darn light, and I think when you think of all the injuries, the ankle injuries and stuff, they're like dancing pumps, the boots that they wear nowadays. There's no support for the ankles. And I never heard of a hamstring injury until I come out to this country. But they seem to get them everywhere now, but I'd never heard of a hamstring before.
Yeah. Yes, even the balls. I bet you'd like to shoot one of them balls, the ball of today, Bert.
They're that light. I mean, you could turn them on a threepenny bit because they're that light. That's why you could swerve a ball past how the Continentals are so good at swerving the ball, because the ball's light. I mean, used to be leather. And by gosh, when they were sodden and you got hit with a ball on the groin or something like that, you certainly felt it.
Did you ever cut one right in the face?
Oh, yes. Of course, the thing is that the people really don't seem to hit a ball properly. We were always said, the best way to hit a ball, just think you're walking down the street and you just nod your head and say, how do you do? Then somebody you know. But catch it on the forehead and this sort of
Yeah, that's great, Bert. No doubt, Bert, all the years you've played, you will have some highlights and some incidents that you'd like to tell us about.
Oh, yes, there's been a lot around. I suppose I was a hot-headed chap and would never willfully foul a man. A lot of people reckon I would, but I went in hard. I was told when I was a young fellow playing against men that you could never get hiding on a field. The thing is that you just keep going hard, because the referee will order the other chap over if he throws a punch. You could only get one punch thrown at you before the referee should be able to see it. Anyway, I remember a few days, even up in Bayswater, coming off the field, and some woman up there threw a handful of gravel at me, and of course I sweat a lot and everything stuck to my face. I mean, I think somebody had a disease, really. But by gosh, it was and the day at Perth Oval, chap come and spat on me, so I thumped him, and then the riot started. They were lifting flagpoles, everything. Unfortunately, when I went up to the tribunal, I got 20 weeks suspension. Even the murderers were getting time off for the Queen's visit. There were a goalkeeper out here. He'd been suspended for life in Melbourne, and he got lifted. I did finish up getting mine finally reduced to 10 weeks. But it was a long time out my days, by gosh.
It's half a season, isn't it?
Half a season. But still, I come out I was never strong on the training when you're getting on in years, because I reckon I had one run a week, and I said, well, we'll keep that for the match.
That's for sure. Now, what about the a day in the life of Bert Robertson, 1996?
1996? Well, I'm fortunate. I've got a lot of friends, and I go out and play golf twice a week. Wednesdays at Collier, play 18 holes at Collier and 18 holes at Wembley. I play with the chaps that work with me in the brewery, and we have 18 holes, start early in the morning. The tavern keeper will open the bar for us when we finish, and we'll go and have 2 or 3 beers. and that's the only time I drink. After people won't believe that, after like I worked in the brewery, but I didn't drink much in the brewery. But I used to enjoy my few beers on a Saturday after the game.
No, you earned them them days, Bert.
Pardon?
You earned them them days. Your performance on the field was incredible. Yeah.
Yes, used to do. Every time even when I go back, I go and see some of the old fellas. He said, "God, I had a nickname. It was Doodles." And the chap said, "You're no Doodles." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I remember you were playing this. You were going to play this job, and I was the trainer." He said, "This Tommy Doherty," he said, "I'm going to kick Doodles off the field tonight." He said he come off after 10 minutes. You were so good.
Yeah, now a big thing I would have been, Bert, at your age, you were just in your prime when war come along. So no doubt the years of war affected your possibly playing with Dundee or wherever it may have been. Can you fill us in on that lot?
Yes, well, there is a lot in that too, but I did go to Dundee United there in '37, but unfortunately there were no, money was very short around, and they couldn't pay any close season wages, so they had to give everybody, released every player on the books because they couldn't play any close season wages. So I said, well, the hell with that. I could have gone to some of the other second division teams and that, and I said, no, I would have reinstated and played for the Stubby. But as regards during the war, it was wonderful. Like I played for the Navy against the Marines, and then the Navy and the Marines against the Army and the Air Force. I played in Newfoundland, America, Russia. Went up there, a submarine went up there, and we played the team in Algiers, played in Alexandria, down in Trincomalee. I mean, there's very few places in the world that I haven't played. Even coming to Dakin Passage, our ship had got damaged Dakin Passage down there, broad daylight, and skipper said, "Anybody want to have a game at football?" Well, I had a ball in my thing, because balls had to come by, and I went down to the PTI store and I pinched the ball. And anyway, I said, "I've got one in my bag." So we just went on a little island. It wouldn't be much bigger than a football pitch, and by God, we had a game there, and it was wonderful. This in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a little island there where we got the game.
Well, you've certainly seen a bit of the world then, Bert, but anyhow,
yes.
More than thank you for allowing me to interview you today. I consider it an honour, and I say that with all honesty, because you'll be one of the best footballers I've ever played with, and all I do, Bert, is wish you golf well, and so lovely to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. It's been wonderful meeting you over, and I got to know you a lot better when we were in Adelaide together. It was lovely to win that final there.
My word. Alec covered that the other night when I was just talking with Alec Mansfield.
Yeah.
Anyhow, once again, Bert, thank you very much.
Yeah, right, thank you. It's been nice seeing you. Beautiful.
Lovely to talk to Bert. Women's soccer. Soccer for the women was first appearance in women's soccer was in Margaret River in 1946. Women in the metropolitan region played a game between the WASFA and Julia. They donated all takings to charity, the Spastic Welfare Association, on the 9th of the 10th, 60. Mid-1969, Richard Bales, soccer writer for the Sunday Times, and Dr. Oscar Mate formed the Australian Girls Soccer Association. January 1970 was its starting date. Since those days, the ladies' game in WA has gone from strength to strength, and there were many who worked hard for women's soccer, possibly two who devoted exceptionally service between 1974 and 1985 were Barbara Gibson and Peter Demopoulos. Barbara and Peter devoted many years of valuable service to our code at all levels. Yes, the women's side of soccer in WA is very healthy. Junior soccer is also very healthy, as Peter Burke has told us in the history of late. School soccer was first formed in 1900 by a Mr. Alex Peters, and the teams at Fremantle, South Perth, East Perth, a high school, Claremont, Midland, came in at a later date. Today, in 1996, our schools competition is in an excellent position with a Mr. Peter Rickards, one of the chief administrators. Referees. Referees record shows that the Referees Association was reformed on May the 13th, 1922. Coincidence, as soccer was formed on May the 13th, 1896. The meeting was in the Sports Club in Perth. Before this association being formed, it was a voluntary association dated back from 1912. No payment in the early days, and at times referees had to be selected from the spectators. In 1922, the chairman-elect was a Mr. Simpson and the secretary a Mr. A.T. Amory. In 1939, the referees presented a trophy for the best sporting team, and it was won by the Spearwood Rovers Soccer Club, today's Cockburn United. Country soccer. The goldfields rush in the 1890s was the reason why soccer officially commenced in the goldfields in 1894. First game recorded was a team playing in shirts, their opposition playing in vests, and the game finishing in a 3-all tie. Today, soccer is still being played in the goldfields as well as country centres as far south as Albany and up north to Port Hedland. And we must not forget the big part the group settlement scheme played in English personnel that arrived in WA in the 1920s, and many finished up with metropolitan clubs. My thank Alf Hines, a true stocker stalwart, who played over 300 games for Spearwood Cockburn, for compiling grounds of yesteryears. Friendly games 1890s were played at Russell Square. Spearwood Rovers, Fruitgrove Reserve, South Coogee and Davalac Reserve. Cockburn United today is at Beale Park, and also started at Fruitgroves too. Fremantle Rangers was Fremantle Park. Fremantle City was Gibson Park and Stephen Street. Tricolour was South Beach Reserve and Walk Park. Hamilton Hill Soccer Club, Davalac Reserve. Caledonians with Jubilee Road these days in Bassendean, but originally they were Mosman's Park Reserve. Victoria Park, Raphael Park. Thistles, Esplanade. Casuals, Esplanade. Perth City, Esplanade and Balga, Sorrento. Swan Valley, Basketball Oval. Swan Athletic, McDonald Road Reserve. North Perth, Woodville Reserve. South Perth, Richardson Park. Maccabees on the Esplanade and Memorial Park, Mount Yokine. West Perth Soccer Club, Greeny Square. Cottesloe Soccer Club, Cottesloe Oval. And quite a different few clubs played at the showgrounds where today's amusement park section is. Queen's Park was Canning Athletic Ground today. It was also Coker Park and Wharf Street. Kalamunda, Azura, 1932 they played at Kalamunda. Azuris were Dureen Gardens. Sokol, well, call it what you like, but there was a ground of a sort up at 3rd Street, I think it was, Bassendean. Balmoral was Fraser Park. Balmoral, of course, them days was East Victoria Park. Various clubs played at Langley Park. E&G played at Wellington Square. Perth Corinthians initially played at Wellington Square. Claremont Mental Hospital at Greylands Hospital. Subiaco Soccer Club played at Rosalie Park, and also Shenton Park played there. Midland Soccer Club and Emu Rangers was at Midland. South Belmont Soccer Club was at Belmont Ground. East Claremont Soccer Club, College Park, Claremont. Emu Rangers was Midland. I think I mentioned Emu Rangers before. Medina Soccer Club was Medina. Rockingham. And there's no doubt some that we've missed. If so, we're sorry that we've failed to record them, because today's clubs and grounds, I think they will be recorded for many years for the future. So let's go back to our interviews. Yes, today's grounds will be well recorded. So let's meet more of our champions on tape 2.